October 2025. For months, astronomers believed they could read the sky the way ancient sailors once read the sea, with certainty, with faith, with numbers that always aligned with the rhythm of nature. And then came 3I divided by Atlas. A comet that should have behaved like any other frozen wanderer suddenly tore the script apart. Its brightness no longer rose slowly and steadily. Instead, it leapt upward, as if ignited by some unnamed force. What should have been a smooth curve of light turned into a jagged, violent streak of defiance. For the first time in years, observatories recorded silence instead of answers. The data no longer matched the models, and behind every news bulletin, every scientific report, a heavy layer of unease grew thicker. This unease was not ordinary. It carried the weight of a violation, as if one of the universe's oldest covenants had just been broken. Comets were supposed to brighten as they approached the Sunday. They did so on a timetable humanity could chart like a calendar, but Atlas did not. From October 10 to October 18, its brightness surged violently, defying every forecast. Instead of rising by a modest fraction as expected, it exploded into a leap so fierce it looked almost deliberate. Some whispered comparisons to a car racing down a highway and suddenly slamming the accelerator to the floor in the dead of night. No warning, no reason, only raw light and brutal speed. The air in scientific forums thickened with suspicion. Were the instruments broken? Had amateur observers reported faulty numbers? Or was this strange light merely a trick of the lens? But night after night, across continents, the truth repeated itself. Amateur telescopes in Chile, South Africa, and Australia all recorded the same impossible slope. The comet's atmosphere seemed to breathe, swelling and collapsing, while its brightness pulsed like a living being no longer bound by any law. The very idea of space weather forecasts, once the foundation of comet science, crumbled before their eyes. By late October, as Atlas drew within 2 astronomical units of the Sun, the tension had spilled beyond the research community. Online, ordinary people began to notice the strange silence of the great observatories. Hubble, James Webb, Gemini facilities that never missed a chance to showcase cosmic wonders had all gone dark. Since August, not a single official image has been released. That absence reverberated like a terrible emptiness. In its place, social media was flooded with blurry amateur photos, strange streaks of light, and anxious speculation. Was this just another unusual comet, or was something being hidden? Why had humanity's sharpest eyes suddenly gone blind at the very moment the sky demanded answers? Each day of silence only deepened the belief that some invisible hand was covering up something vast, something darker. For scientists, the problem was not just the brightness. The problem was the pattern of rebellion. Comets were meant to be faithful diaries of nature, icy bodies, obediently following thermodynamics, releasing gas and dust in steady rhythms. But Atlas seemed to mock even that principle. From October 22 to October 29, it surged again, climbing so far that its light curve no longer resembled error, but revolt. Atlas was not simply brighter. It was defying the very notion that humanity could ever understand comets. In classrooms, professors stumbled through explanations with trembling voices. In laboratories, teams argued over lens effects, measurement errors, and surface fractures. Yet none of it felt convincing. The cold truth remained. No one knew why Atlas behaved this way, and in that gap of knowledge, humanity rediscovered an ancient fear, the fear that the universe cannot truly be predicted, that order might collapse into chaos at any moment. As one astronomer whispered at a closed-door symposium, "It feels as if Atlas is staring at us, not the other way around." November 2025. The first winter nights draped across the northern hemisphere, and the frozen sky only made the light of 3I divided by Atlas more uncanny. It was no longer a faint streak on astronomical charts, but a mischievous, unpredictable dot, as if playing hide and seek with every telescope. Reports poured in, its brightness kept outpacing predictions, its light curve rising ever more steeply. Each time scientists thought they had found a model to explain it, Atlas shattered it with another sudden leap. Its stubbornness made it feel less like a lump of ice and dust, and more like a will. Unease spilled out of the laboratories, touching people who had never paid attention to science news. In cafes, on midnight trains, in social media posts, Atlas became a strange name, whispered by everyone. Many connected it to ancient omens, those times when an unusually bright star was seen as a signal of disaster, war, or a change of destiny. Human history was heavy with records of fear provoked by defiant lights in the sky. And now, in the 21st century of technology, that same fear had returned primal and vivid, as if it had never left. The great observatories remained silent. Not a single official image was released from Hubble or James Webb, even though they were expected to be humanity's sharpest eyes. That silence became fertile ground for doubt and conspiracy theories. Was it really true that they had gathered no data, or was the data too shocking to reveal? Why, at the very moment of greatest importance, would institutions that once shared every detail suddenly choose to hide? These questions spread waves of unease across the public, transforming Atlas into a buried mystery rather than just an astronomical event. Within academia, tension mounted. Emergency conferences were held online, and preliminary papers flooded open archives. But instead of bringing answers, they only deepened the chaos. Some scientists insisted this was nothing more than an outburst, a surge of gas and dust when hidden ice pockets fractured. But data from many regions showed that the frequency and intensity of these outbursts went far beyond any precedent. Others emphasized the aperture effect, claiming differences in measurement methods had exaggerated the brightness. Yet even when the community tentatively accepted that theory, Atlas kept breaking every statistic, as if determined to prove it would not fit into any theoretical box. On clear nights at the end of November, as Atlas edged closer to Mars's orbit, amateur observers swore its light was not only radiant but haunting. A greenish glow mixed with silver-white, like a cold flame burning in the void. People captured images, edited them, spread them online, and soon Atlas had slipped out of scientific boundaries, becoming a visual symbol of mystery itself. The rising unease grew heavier. Was the sky signaling some great upheaval about to come? What made the phenomenon even stranger was Atlas's speed. Calculations showed it was racing at hundreds of thousands of kilometers per hour, fast enough to cross a continent in mere seconds. Each time scientists tried to keep pace with it, the data slipped through their hands. The world seemed to be watching a traveler who did not wish to be understood, did not wish to be caught. And in that disobedience, Atlas became a mirror, reflecting humanity's own helplessness before the cosmos. The more progress we made, the more telescopes we built, the more advanced our technology became, the more fragile our knowledge appeared when confronted with the unknown. In the darkness of long winter nights, the old question returned, whispered in trembling voices. If the stars no longer follow the laws, what in this life can still be certain? December 2025. As the spirit of Christmas seeped into the cities, the sky kept for itself a cold secret. 3I divided by Atlas continued to defy every prediction. Scientists had believed that at this stage, the comet's brightness would gradually stabilize before reaching its peak. Instead, Atlas chose a different path. From December 3 to December 10, it flared once again, violently, as if sending an intentional signal. Data charts, once treated as the scripture of astronomy, now bent so sharply they resembled meaningless scribbles. In New York, a closed-door meeting of leading scientists unfolded under a heavy atmosphere. On the screen, they projected light curves climbing relentlessly upward. Each jagged line was a blow to the belief that the universe could be modeled. We are facing an entity whose behavior cannot be contained by any known law, one professor admitted, his voice hoarse. No one applauded, no one murmured, only silence filled the room. A silence heavy enough to feel like an admission of failure. Beyond those walls, the public began to invent endless stories around Atlas. Some claimed it was an omen of the apocalypse, others believed it was a messenger from a distant civilization. A more daring crowd insisted world governments knew more than they were willing to disclose. However, lacking in scientific foundation, these theories reflected an undeniable truth. Atlas had escaped the confines of numbers and become a symbol of collective unease. Each night, thousands of amateur telescopes turned toward the sky. People were not just observing, they were waiting for an explanation, waiting for an announcement, waiting for something to confirm that the world was still under control. But Atlas offered no such reassurance. It flared without warning, then dimmed, then flared again like a disordered heartbeat. That irregular rhythm sowed an invisible dread. Perhaps what was drifting through the solar system was not merely a body of ice and dust. On social media, new images spread like wildfire. Some were taken on phones, grainy yet haunting. Others were digitally processed, colors compressed to highlight the comet's eerie green glow. Different in quality, they carried the same sensation: cold, alien, and almost like an eye. Millions of comments poured in, many tinged with both curiosity and tremor. Is it watching us? Meanwhile, academia fractured into sharper divisions. One camp insisted Atlas was simply an extreme case, still within the natural frame. The other argued that humanity was witnessing something unprecedented, perhaps a fragment from another star system, carrying its own set of laws Earth's science could not yet grasp. But regardless of their stance, they all agreed on one point. Atlas had made them feel smaller than ever, for if a comet could betray every model, what assurance was left that the rest of science's predictions about the cosmos would hold? As the year drew to an end, while fireworks prepared to light the sky in celebration, people still whispered about another light, the light of Atlas. Not a joyful brilliance, but a piercing cold radiance, like a cryptic symbol suspended above humanity. And woven into the cheerful wishes for the new year was a quiet layer of fear that in the coming year, the universe would ask even more questions, and humankind might not be ready to answer. The last night of 2025, while clocks in city squares ticked down the final seconds to the new year, many people did not raise their eyes to the fireworks. Instead, they gazed quietly toward another corner of the sky. There, 3I divided by Atlas hovered like a colossal question mark, shining unnaturally against the darkness. It was no longer just present in the heavens, it haunted conversations, filled the pages of newspapers, and slipped into anxious dreams. By the final days of December, science bulletins still carried no definitive answers. Every analysis stalled at the phrase, "cannot yet be explained." Printed charts were crossed out, and heated debates dissolved into silence. Atlas seemed like a strange machine, running calmly beyond human comprehension, and each irregular flicker eroded another fragment of knowledge. The more lenses turned upward, the more truths fell into doubt. In that atmosphere, rumors grew stronger. Some claimed Atlas bore the traits of something artificial, something crafted, not born by chance. Others swore they saw repeating flashes, like coded signals hidden in the bursts of light. The less evidence there was, the faster the theories spread. And it was this very ambiguity that made Atlas frightening. It could be anything, from an extraordinary shard of ice and dust to a messenger from somewhere humanity could never imagine. The prolonged silence of the great observatories had by now fractured public trust. If nothing was unusual, why not release the data? If it were just a natural phenomenon, why were the high-resolution images still withheld? At New Year's parties, amid the clinking of glasses and the cheer of toasts, such questions still echoed. People were beginning to doubt not only the sky, but also those who claimed to hold the power of watching it. In Tokyo, a group of students stood on the rooftop of a high-rise, peering through a small telescope. Atlas appeared as an unusually long streak of light, flickering like a candle in the wind. One of them whispered, "What if it isn't a comet?" No one answered. A sudden silence fell, heavier than the winter chill. In that moment, they all felt the same thing. A presence, distant, yet overwhelming, watching them. Across the world, the sensation repeated itself, from isolated desert observatories to cramped balconies in crowded cities. Atlas did not merely seem to be seen, it seemed to see back, and that thought sent shivers through millions. In ancient myths, the stars were believed to be the eyes of the gods, but in this age, Atlas carried a different weight, not divine, but a foreign gaze, silent, unyielding, and unfathomable. When the midnight bells rang, people embraced and wished one another peace. Yet somewhere, in the deepest layers of consciousness, a question no one wanted to voice still lingered. If Atlas does not obey the laws, how many other things in the universe are also waiting to break what we thought was certain? That question, together with the comet's uncanny glow in the sky, became the New Year's gift no one had wished for. A gift wrapped in unease, mystery, fear, doubt, and wonder. A beginning no one could predict, and perhaps that is the truest nature of the universe. Late December 2025, while the world was still unsettled by Atlas's erratic bursts of brightness, a fresh wave of data sent shock through the public. If before the main concern was its light, this time attention turned to something even more astonishing. The faint atmosphere surrounding the comet, the coma, as scientists call it, was swelling at an impossible pace, far beyond every previous prediction. It was no longer a fragile mist, but resembled a vast ocean of gas spreading uncontrollably through the void. The coma is supposed to be simple to explain. When a comet's icy surface meets the sun's rays, the ice sublimates, carrying dust and gas that form a hazy shell around its nucleus. But Atlas shattered that script. Numbers streaming in from multiple observatories showed not only that its size was increasing rapidly, but that it was growing in a way that mocked the laws of physics themselves. Records suggested it had already reached hundreds of thousands of kilometers, a scale so immense it simply could not fit within old theories. One researcher exclaimed during an online symposium, "It's swelling, as if an invisible hand were pumping air from within." The phrase, "pumping air from within," sent a jolt through the conference. It was no longer dry scientific language, but a confession laced with awe, helplessness, and fear. If that hypothesis were true, it meant Atlas was not merely reacting to external forces, it was operating with some unknown internal energy. Attendees fell silent, their faces marked with shock. To them, this was the same as watching a law of physics break apart before their very eyes. The astonishment did not remain within academic walls. International media quickly ran the story, but no longer in dry tones. Articles took on a metaphorical edge, calling Atlas a cosmic balloon, a giant lung breathing in the galaxy, or a veil of mist swallowing light. The public, largely unfamiliar with scientific terminology, instantly grasped the menace in those phrases. One reader even commented, "If it can expand that much, what if one day it swallows the whole sky?" On social media, visual simulations spread at lightning speed. People compared the coma's size to Earth, to Jupiter, even to the Sunday. Though the figures were not fully verified, the psychological effect was undeniable. Atlas was no longer just a comet. It had become a symbol of the absurd, something that forced humanity to look up and wonder, how much else in the universe lies beyond our comprehension? Within the research community, feelings of fear mingled with scientific fascination. On one hand, they were terrified of confronting the void of knowledge. On the other hand, they were captivated by its mystery. Every new line of data arrived like a dare. Take one more step into the darkness no one has yet entered. Teams of researchers lost sleep for weeks, analyzing infrared spectra, arguing over gas composition. Some swore the anomaly was due to unusual levels of CO2. Others pushed back, claiming some overlooked factor must be at play, perhaps exotic compounds, or even a wholly new physical mechanism. Out of this conflict, reverence grew sharper, awe not because Atlas was an enemy force, but because it revealed the limits of human intellect. With every pulse of its swelling coma, people saw not only the spread of ice and dust, but also the widening gulf between what we think we know and the brutal truths of the cosmos. Atlas was no longer confined to telescopes. It had entered the human mind, becoming a hovering obsession that challenged faith in the stability of natural law. And as the world stepped into 2026, people realized that what lay ahead was not merely the observation of a comet, but a confrontation with the fragility of science itself. Science they had once trusted without question. January 2026. The freezing air blanketed the northern hemisphere, yet in research centers, winter was almost forgotten. All attention fixed on a single number, the radius of 3I divided by Atlas's coma. The latest spectroscopic measurements showed that this gaseous envelope had grown several times beyond predictions, reaching a colossal scale nearly half the diameter of the Sunday. That figure left even seasoned scientists speechless, for if the data were real, it meant that within our own solar system, there now existed a cloud of matter so immense it could obscure the confidence of modern physics itself. During an international online session, dozens of scientists from across continents debated. Faces on the split screen looked tense. A German professor pointed at the graph. Even if CO2 dominates, the evaporation rate should not be this fast. We are missing something. An astronomer from Chile cut in. It may be a compound never before observed, some exotic ice, found only in distant star systems. The debate stretched for hours, but instead of narrowing toward an answer, it revealed a deeper truth. Everyone was being pulled into the labyrinth of Atlas, where each hypothesis opened only new dead ends. Scientific curiosity, mixed with unease, spilled into younger circles. On student forums, Atlas became a heated subject. Some compared it to the idea of hypothetical life, as if an inanimate body were behaving like a living being. They spoke of the coma's swelling and contraction as breaths, as the slow heartbeat of a giant machine buried beneath ice and dust. Strange as these comparisons sounded, they reflected one thing. People were no longer seeing Atlas as a remote object, but as something with character, with behavior, perhaps harboring a secret. The press quickly followed suit. Major newspapers published illustrations comparing Atlas's coma to planets. Some journalists went further, dubbing it the giant in a fragile cloak, an entity whose very existence seemed like a taunt thrown at the physics equations humanity once trusted absolutely. Readers consumed and debated, caught between fear and fascination. The fear lay in the unimaginable scale, the fascination in the anomaly itself. Everyone wanted to know, at last, what this thing truly was. But what stunned observers most was not only the size, it was the speed. Measurements showed the coma was expanding many times faster than theoretical limits allowed. It was not simply swelling by the logic of temperature. It seemed driven by some hidden source of energy. A young scientist in Japan wrote in her research journal, "Sometimes it feels like we're watching a balloon about to burst, but no one knows when, and no one knows what it holds." Her words spread quickly online, becoming one of the most widely shared quotes about Atlas. Amid the confusion, one truth was unmistakable. The more humanity looked at Atlas, the more it revealed their limitations. It did not merely shake the foundations of physics, it made humankind feel smaller than they had in decades, dwarfed by something they could not command. Faced with an atmosphere swelling at a pace that defied reason, science no longer felt like a shield of certainty, but like a fragile sheet of paper swept up by the wind. And within that sensation, awe and fear peaked together. Atlas was no longer just a strange comet. It had become a brutal reminder. The universe is always larger than we dare to believe. In mid-January 2026, as cold air sharpened the night skies, Atlas once again astonished the world. Telescopes recorded that its coma was not only swelling, but beginning to emit strange structures. In long-exposure photographs, the streams of gas and dust did not scatter randomly, but arranged themselves into delicate striations, like patterns etching a secret language across the heavens. The phenomenon shook the scientific community. A research team in Europe called it plasma self-organization, when dust and gas particles, ionized under the influence of solar wind and magnetic fields, weave themselves into filaments of light. The explanation was plausible, yet the scale and clarity of the patterns around Atlas far exceeded anything previously observed. Many scientists admitted they felt as though they were watching something alive, rather than a purely physical event. The public was quickly captivated. Images spread across the internet with breathtaking speed. Some compared them to the giant veins of a cosmic organism. Others even claimed they resembled ancient symbols, characters that humanity had never deciphered. While such assertions were mostly products of imagination, they reflected a deeper truth. Atlas had crossed the boundary of science to become a visual emblem of mystery. In universities, discussions were no longer dry. Students whispered that Atlas was like a new school of the cosmos, teaching humanity that our current knowledge was but a grain of sand compared to the ocean still unexplored. One elderly professor, who had taught celestial mechanics for 4 decades, confessed to his class, "If you feel confused, rest assured, so do we. Atlas is forcing the entire world to start over." His words were recorded and shared widely, a sign that even the generation most secure in the laws of physics now trembled before this anomaly. Anxiety grew when independent research groups published data showing CO2 levels in the coma many times higher than those of familiar comets. This implied that Atlas was either born in an environment so frigid that CO2 froze before water, or it carried a chemical mechanism never before known. Both possibilities were astonishing. Some scientists speculated that it could be a fragment from a distant star system, forged in conditions so extreme that Earth's physics could not apply. That thought alone was enough to send chills down listeners' spines. Perhaps Atlas was a frozen memory of the deep universe, passing through the solar system to remind us that there are realities beyond imagination. In society, Atlas had become both a source of fear and fascination. Some worried that the abnormal swelling signaled a colossal explosion, capable of unleashing destructive energy. Others believed it was merely the opening act of a majestic cosmic performance, a chance for humanity to witness beauty beyond poetry. Between those extremes, one emotion grew unmistakable: awe. Awe not because Atlas directly threatened Earth's survival, but because it forced people to confront the possibility that the laws we consider immutable might be nothing more than the first chapter of an unfinished book. And on those winter nights, when countless eyes lifted toward the sky, not everyone found peace. Instead, in Atlas's eerie green glow, they saw a reminder. The universe is not only vast, but layered with mysteries deep enough to shake the very foundations of human belief. By the end of January 2026, when observatories finally released their preliminary reports, the public realized that Atlas had moved far beyond the realm of an ordinary astronomical event. Its coma had spread so vastly that scientists compared it to a balloon so immense that if Earth were placed inside, the entire planet would vanish like a speck of dust within its gaseous shell. The comparison hit with staggering force. People no longer talked about dry numbers, they began imagining unsettling scenarios. If an object could carve out a space of its own on that scale, what limits, if any, existed for its potential? In public lectures, scientists had to alter their tone. Gone were the confident declarations. Their voices now carried caution, tinged with wonder. A renowned astronomer said on live television, "Atlas is not just a mirror of the universe's richness. It is also a reminder that we are still standing on the threshold of knowledge. Everything we know may be only the small tip of a vast iceberg still hidden." The words rang out like a collective confession. Faith in the omnipotence of modern physics was trembling. Anxiety deepened when new observations showed that the coma was not expanding evenly. Instead, irregular, bright, and dim regions emerged, like colossal whirlpools within the gaseous ocean. Some researchers even suggested the presence of an internal flow, operating by rules independent of solar wind. If true, it implied Atlas was adjusting the way it existed, an idea that both suffocated curiosity and chilled the spine. In society, Atlas became a symbol of questions without answers. Newspapers compared it to other cosmic enigmas, black holes, dark energy. Editorials spoke of its irrational expansion as a crack in the wall of knowledge. The more humanity peered into that crack, the clearer it became that on the other side lay an abyss never before glimpsed. Yet in the midst of fear, there flickered something like exhilaration. Physics students hurled themselves into studying Atlas, as if they had discovered a new flame of inspiration. They stayed awake through the nights, debating models, writing bold essays, proposing mechanisms never before imagined. Some even called Atlas the largest natural laboratory the universe has ever sent us. They did not fear it. On the contrary, they felt lucky to be alive at the moment when a supposedly immutable law was being tested in public view. As January closed, a single question echoed everywhere. If physics can be challenged, what else is truly certain? It was not merely a scientific question, but a philosophical one, seeping into art, culture, and even politics. Atlas, with its colossal coma, had become a mirror reflecting not only the sky but also the depths of the human mind. In that mirror, humanity saw its smallness, and at the same time, its relentless hunger to explore. And so, Part 2 ended in paradox. Atlas spread unease, yet ignited unprecedented curiosity. It shook faith in physics, yet opened new doors for science. Between astonishment and reverence, humanity came to understand it was no longer the master of absolute knowledge, but a student entering the universe's first classroom. And the opening lesson Atlas inscribed across the sky was bitter yet radiant. Nothing in this universe is ever truly under our control. February 2026. While winter still held the northern hemisphere in its grip, a piece of news spread that made the entire world lift its eyes to the sky. 3I divided by Atlas now glowed with a strange green light, no longer the pale white streak or faint blur familiar from other comets, but a vivid emerald aura, radiant and icy, as if poured down from another world. For the first time, in Namibia, astrophotographers captured the sight, the whole sky veiled in a green haze, dreamlike and surreal. The images spread at lightning speed, transforming Atlas from a scientific subject into a global visual icon. People were overwhelmed. Millions of eyes gazed into that green curtain, unable to find words. Some compared it to the auroras of the far north, yet had to admit the feeling was entirely different. Auroras are nature's dance, but the green light of Atlas felt more like a message. It did not swirl, it did not change hues. It remained steady, unwavering, as if declaring to humanity, "I am here, and I want you to notice." The scientific community quickly sought explanations. They pointed to carbon fluorescence. When diatomic carbon molecules, C2, are excited by ultraviolet sunlight, they emit green light. Yet theory did nothing to lessen the shock in the public's mind. Atlas did not simply glow green. It glowed too early, too strongly, and for far too long. What had always been a fleeting feature in other comets had become a sustained performance. The question arose, why is Atlas different? Does it carry a chemical signature unknown to science? While laboratories busied themselves analyzing spectral lines, people outside experienced the light in an entirely different way. On vast fields in Africa, South America, and Australia, thousands stood beneath the mysterious green sky, feeling as though they were living inside a dream. Some wept, some fell silent, some took photo after photo, afraid the moment would vanish. More than a few whispered that the glow was beautiful to the point of pain, a beauty not of this world, the kind that makes you want to touch it and flee from it at the same time. Online, artists began painting Atlas, but soon admitted defeat. "No canvas can hold that green," one painter wrote. "It's not a color, it's a sensation, like hearing a piece of music that makes your chest tremble, except this time, it's light that makes your eyes quiver." Such words only deepened the public's belief that Atlas was no longer just an alien body, but a shared experience, a mystery the entire human race had been invited to witness together. As night fell, the green glow lingered patiently in the sky, defying all explanations, and within the awe, a hidden fear took shape. For humanity understood, the more unnatural the beauty, the greater the danger it might conceal. Beneath that surreal radiance, a whisper echoed, "What is really happening inside Atlas?" March 2026. The green light of Atlas was no longer news for astronomers alone. It had become a global cultural phenomenon. Photos and videos spread with hurricane force across every platform. In Tokyo, thousands gathered on the rooftops of skyscrapers, capturing the emerald halo spilling over the city like a veil of mysterious mist. In Rio de Janeiro, Copacabana Beach overflowed with people standing in silence, their eyes not on fireworks or neon, but on a strange lamp hanging in space. In Paris, street artists abandoned their usual landscapes and instead painted the eerie green glow on walls, as though trying to preserve a collective dream. The sense of awe had now transcended science, seeping into psychology and daily life. People felt both gifted and tested. A young poet wrote online, "It is a signal light for humanity, not red, not yellow, but green, the color of life, and also the color of cold mysteries." The verse spread like wildfire, turning Atlas into an emblem of contemporary literature itself. Yet beneath admiration, hidden fear lingered. Psychologists began to study the phenomenon. They noted a rise in reports of strange dreams. People claimed to see the green light flooding their bedrooms, coating every wall, then transforming into shapes without names. Some swore they heard whispers in their sleep, as if Atlas itself were trying to communicate. No scientific evidence supported these collective dreams, but experts admitted Atlas's light had imprinted itself deeply in humanity's subconscious, more powerfully than any astronomical event before it. Within research circles, surreal inspiration began to flicker. A team of physicists in North America proposed a daring hypothesis. The green glow might not be carbon fluorescence alone, but an interaction of molecules never before recorded in a laboratory. This could be the first time we are seeing a form of primordial matter, something that has existed since the universe was born, one scientist suggested, his eyes gleaming with both passion and fear. The idea could not be tested quickly, yet it was enough to spark profound curiosity. Perhaps Atlas was a doorway into the distant past, where the very first laws of the cosmos were written. Public lectures grew crowded. People pressed together to hear astronomers explain the phenomenon, only to leave with more questions than answers. Some whispered as they exited, "Maybe we don't need answers. Maybe Atlas was sent to remind us that some things cannot be explained." Instead of disappointment, those whispers carried the weight of ritual, as if humanity were bowing together before mystery. The beauty of Atlas, in its unnaturalness, became a paradox. It enthralled people so completely they forgot their fear, yet it also planted a trembling inside them. This beauty was not of Earth, not ours, and therefore it might bear a warning. Many commentators compared the green light to a poisoned flower, radiant, seductive, but known to conceal venom. In the dark, as the green glow stretched like a spectral carpet across the sky, a surreal feeling enveloped everything. People did not merely watch, they felt drawn inward, as if stepping across the threshold of another world. And in that moment, humanity understood it was not just observing a comet, but sharing in one of the rarest collective experiences in history. A strange beauty that overwhelmed the senses while chilling them to the bone. By mid-March 2026, the green glow of Atlas had become a phenomenon shared by the entire planet. No telescope, no magnification was needed. Many could see the faint emerald halo clinging to its streak across the sky. Whether in quiet countryside or beneath the glare of cities, anyone who looked up saw it, an unnatural green presence. It was neither as harsh as neon lights nor as soft as the aurora. It hovered between extremes, both gentle and piercing, like an unfamiliar gaze humanity had never known how to meet. In squares, on beaches, on rooftops, people gathered to witness it together. Strangely, unlike the excitement of past astronomical events, these crowds were quiet. No cheers, no shouts, only silence, eyes fixed on the enchanted green sky. A reporter in Berlin described it. It felt like a ceremony without a leader, where thousands held their breath at once, as if taking part in an ancient ritual conducted by the universe itself. The surreal beauty of Atlas required no explanation. It created reverence in silence. Meanwhile, scientists pressed on with their decoding. Spectra showed that Atlas's carbon emission lines were unusually intense, many times greater than in any comet previously studied. Some research teams began to ask bold questions. Could Atlas's core conceal compounds never before recorded, perhaps hinting at rare chemical conditions from the dawn of the cosmos? The very thought made many shiver, for if true, then the green light we now saw was not just an optical effect, it was a message from the universe's past, revealing things humanity had never touched. Yet alongside admiration and scientific wonder, fear lingered. Many speculated that Atlas's green glow could be a warning, a release of unstable energy, a sign of internal fracture. Collective dreams of the green light continued to spread worldwide. Psychologists noted a rise in what they called astronomical obsession syndrome, as people lay sleepless, haunted by the glow imprinted in their minds. Some confessed that whenever they closed their eyes, they saw their rooms flooded with the same green, cold, and hollow, as though reality itself were being drained away. Artists, however, embraced it as endless inspiration. Composers wrote symphonies, drawn from the glow. Painters filled canvases with abstract layers of turquoise and emerald. Filmmakers created short films of worlds bathed in green skies. In art, Atlas was no longer a comet but a symbol of the surreal entering daily life. Its beauty was exalted, yet it left its admirers trembling as if each work carried a hidden unease that could not be named. Day by day, Atlas's green glow did not fade. It lingered patiently in the heavens, engraving itself into human memory. Its persistence deepened the disquiet. Ordinary beauty is fleeting. This beauty endured, clung, as though it meant to be present. The unavoidable question began to echo. Are we witnessing a natural phenomenon, or being reminded by a force beyond our understanding? With its unearthly emerald radiance, Atlas had changed humanity's relationship with the sky. The heavens were no longer a distant backdrop, but a mysterious mirror, reflecting awe, fear, and the burning thirst for knowledge that lived within us all. By late March 2026, Atlas's green glow had become the focal point of the entire world, no longer just an astronomical phenomenon. It had turned into a civilizational event, a shared moment experienced by all humanity, regardless of language, culture, or religion. From New York to Cairo, from Cape Town to Moscow, every skyscraper and every remote countryside shared the same vision, looking up to find a mysterious green streak hanging overhead, steady as a reminder that the universe still holds countless secrets. Science now found itself cornered. The models no longer convinced the public. People began to doubt not just Atlas, but the absoluteness of science itself. A veteran astronomer admitted on television, "We once thought we understood the universe, but Atlas reminds us that our knowledge is only a thin line across an endless sea." That confession spread everywhere, stirring both anxiety and deep reverence. In art, the green glow had stepped directly into the heart of culture. Musicians released albums inspired by Atlas. Contemporary dance was staged under simulated emerald light, and painters opened exhibitions titled The Green Messenger. Even some churches in Europe and South America projected Atlas's image during services, treating it as a new emblem of cosmic mystery. For many, this was both awe-inspiring and unsettling, that surreal beauty had leapt beyond science to become a kind of invisible religion. where the green light was revered as a sacred symbol. And yet, the more people admired, the clearer their hidden fears became. Many began to dream of the day the light goes out, the moment Atlas disappears, leaving behind a sky stripped bare. The thought carried with it a strange sense of loss, as though humanity had grown accustomed to living under that otherworldly gaze. Some commentators suggested that people did not just fear Atlas, they feared losing it, feared the vanishing of a surreal anchor that had, unintentionally, become part of daily life. The scientific reports at the end of March only deepened the confusion. Spectral analyses showed that Atlas's green emissions were not fading at all. They remained eerily stable. Instead of dimming as the comet followed its projected orbit, the glow held steady, as though sustained by some hidden mechanism within. Researchers called it unnatural persistence, a phrase the public quickly mocked as sounding more like science fiction than science. In public squares, gatherings of green watching became common. They were not festivals, not rituals, but collective nights of silence. Thousands sat on grass, on stone benches, simply gazing upward, immersed in the mystery. A reporter described it. The whole city felt enclosed within a cathedral, its dome nothing less than Atlas's pale green sky. That beauty, though mesmerizing, still made people tremble. For when beauty surpasses the bounds of nature, it becomes the surreal, and within the surreal always lurks a shade of terror. As Part 3 closed, Atlas was no longer just a comet. It had become a mirror for humanity's imagination and fears. Its green glow both overwhelmed and unsettled, planting the question, was the universe trying to communicate in a wordless language, a language of color, of feeling, of presence beyond reason? And while no one yet had an answer, Atlas's green light remained there, unmoving, like an ellipsis suspended in the vast manuscript the universe continues to write. April 2026. Even before humanity had recovered from the shock of Atlas's surreal green glow, a new phenomenon erupted, leaving the entire astronomical community stunned into silence. The comet's tail no longer pointed away from the sun as it should, but instead turned back, aimed directly toward the source of light itself. The first images came from the southern hemisphere. Long exposure photographs revealed it clearly. Instead of streaming outward in the expected opposite direction, Atlas's dust trail curved back toward the sun, forming a faint but unmistakable triangle. For those who understood celestial mechanics, this was a staggering blow. For centuries of observation from Halley to Hale-Bopp, no comet had ever dared to defy the ancient rule. The tail must always be blown away by the solar wind. And yet here was Atlas, sketching the opposite, like a mischievous child deliberately doing the very thing everyone said it would not. Astronomers rushed to explain. They called it an anti-tail, a geometric illusion that occurs when larger dust particles break away from the comet and settle into a stream parallel to its orbit, making it appear from Earth as though the tail points toward the Sunday. The theory sounded reasonable, but the feeling was harder to soothe. In the circulating photographs, Atlas's anti-tail was too sharp, too deliberate, as if the universe itself were performing a carefully staged trick. Skepticism spread quickly. If it were merely an optical effect, why was it appearing with such clarity? Why did Atlas, time after time, seem to produce phenomena at precisely the moments that would challenge human understanding? First, there was its impossible brightness, then the bloated coma, then the eerie green glow, and now a tail reversed, a reminder that every faith in natural order might be bent at any moment. The public received the phenomenon with a mixture of fascination and dread. Some shared in astonishment that they felt Atlas was mocking humanity. It seemed to know exactly what people expected, and then did the opposite. Images of the anti-tail were quickly color-edited and spread online, many comparing them to a blade of light stabbing straight into the heart of the Sunday. The metaphor was both beautiful and terrifying, for it stirred the sense that Atlas was no longer an inert lump of ice and dust, but a cosmic artist or provocateur. In private meetings, even veteran scientists had to confess their bewilderment. "This is not just geometry," one admitted. "This is visual truth, and that truth is forcing us to doubt our own eyes." The statement cast the room into silence. For if the universe could deceive collective sight through laws unfamiliar to us, how many other things might we see that were never truly real? With its anti-tail, Atlas had become a living emblem of astonishment and doubt. It did not merely raise questions about physics. It posed something deeper. Was the universe playing a trick, Or had humanity lulled itself into illusions of certainty all along? Just days after Atlas's reverse tail was first reported, global social media erupted. Photos streamed in from South America, Africa, and Europe, all showing the same thing. Atlas's tail clearly pointing toward the Sunday. No longer a lone observation, no longer a glitch of equipment. Millions had seen it with their own eyes, millions of cameras had captured it, and once the truth became too widespread to deny, astonishment quickly hardened into profound suspicion. In London, an emergency press conference was convened. Astronomers tried to reassure the public, stressing that the anti-tail is a normal optical effect, observed in a few comets in the past. They projected mathematical models, explaining how large dust particles aligned with the comet's orbit and the viewing angle from Earth. But instead of easing concerns, the explanation fueled unease. For if it were truly normal, why had so few ever heard of it? And why was it Atlas, this comet, that had already broken every rule, that once again, by coincidence, displayed yet another anomaly? In the crowd of reporters, one stood up and asked bluntly, "How can we be sure this isn't a signal, rather than a coincidence?" The question received no satisfying answer, and that silence was more unsettling than any denial. Outside, the public needed no official confirmation. Online forums are filled with theories. Some believed Atlas was transmitting a message, using its tail to write across the sky. Others claimed the reverse tail was evidence of some unnatural energy process, possibly linked to alien technology. A few even claimed to see strange symbols in the anti-tail's shape, arrows pointing directly at the sun, stirring the feeling of some cosmic event looming near. Amid the flood of speculation, one truth became undeniable. The sensation of being deceived by the universe was spreading. Humanity had always trusted the evidence of its own eyes, yet Atlas, with its reverse tail, had shown that even sight could betray. The haunting beauty of that streak of light was like a trick mirror, at once real and unreal, leaving people unable to separate fact from illusion. In major cities, groups of people gathered spontaneously, sitting for hours staring at the sky. They were not searching for answers, only watching in silence, as though waiting for Atlas to reveal its next secret. Some whispered that standing beneath that reverse tail felt like the universe was staring back, as if Atlas was not the observed, but the observer. The doubt now reached beyond physics into the spiritual. Were we witnessing something far greater than science could ever touch? Meanwhile, inside research labs, the arguments grew fierce. One camp held firm. This was nothing but a geometric effect, nothing supernatural. The other asked, why did Atlas keep producing a chain of impossible phenomena, one after another? If each anomaly could be explained in isolation, then taken together, might they suggest an entirely new law we had missed? And that, precisely, was the haunting core. Atlas might be reflecting at us a physics we had never known. From the first wave of astonishment, the world had now plunged into a tide of collective doubt. Atlas, with its reverse tail, had made humanity lose faith in the stability of its own senses and forced a deeper question to the surface. Do we truly understand the universe, or are we merely living inside a sophisticated illusion that nature itself has woven to test us? By late April 2026, as Atlas's reverse tail became the subject of conversation everywhere, the unease no longer remained confined to the scientific community. It had seeped into the deepest layers of the collective psyche. People began whispering about the betrayal of the sky, the idea that what had always been assumed as natural law could turn its back on us at any moment. On online forums, thousands of posts described the feeling of standing beneath the anti-tail. Some said they felt dizzy, as if the sun and Atlas had traded places for a fleeting instant. Others spoke of a strange disorientation. When I looked up, my mind flipped. The tail no longer looked like a tail, but like a pathway of light leading back toward the great fire itself. These personal accounts spread like wildfire, sparking debates. Was Atlas showing humanity the limits of vision itself? Scientists continued their heated arguments. The traditionalists insisted it was simply the inevitable outcome of geometry. But each new set of images gave the skeptics fresh ammunition. The sharpness of the anti-tail, its persistence over several days, even its subtle rhythm aligned with Atlas's orbit. At a conference, a young astronomer declared, "If this is all an illusion, then it's the most patient and consistent illusion the universe has ever produced." The remark quickly echoed through media outlets, becoming a haunting quote that captured the public mood. In daily life, the anti-tail became both an artistic symbol and a waking nightmare. Photographers competed to capture it, calling it the Blade of Light. Graphic designers turned it into an emblem of paradox, plastering it on exhibition posters and magazine covers. Yet alongside the celebration of its eerie beauty came a surge in reports of sleep disorders and psychological distress. Many admitted they no longer dared look directly at Atlas, fearing they might be hypnotized, drawn in, as if that backward streak of light were trying to siphon away their souls. Religion soon joined the chorus. Some priests proclaimed the anti-tail a sign of sacred reversal, a symbol of the day humanity would face truths long hidden. In South America, spiritual groups held midnight festivals, circling city squares with blue torches, treating the reversed tail as a cosmic spear piercing the night. Such rituals added to the chill in the air. What had begun as a physical phenomenon was now transformed into a spiritual icon, stirring layers of awe and dread in equal measure. Meanwhile, social commentators emphasized one alarming truth. Atlas had shattered the core belief that human vision was a reliable witness. If the eye could be deceived so plainly by a reversed tail, then how many other things we've trusted might also be collective illusions? Such questions pushed some people into extreme skepticism, leaving them feeling as if the very stability of their world was collapsing. And within this atmosphere, latent fear surged to the surface. No one dared to declare the anti-tail a harbinger of catastrophe, yet no one felt certain it was harmless either. The stark reality remained. Atlas kept breaking the rules, and humanity had no tools to stop it, only the ability to look up and tremble. Atlas, with its backward streak of light, had turned the sky into a mirror, reflecting humanity's imperfections. In that mirror, we saw ourselves as mere onlookers, bewitched and deceived by the universe's grand spectacle of light. And the longer we stared, the harder it was to shake the feeling that the anti-tail was not just a phenomenon, but a living metaphor for instability poised to erupt. Early May 2026, Atlas continued its passage across the sky, and its reversed tail seemed to lengthen by the day. Where once people hoped the phenomenon might be fleeting, it had now become a permanent feature of the comet's image. Observatories released fresh photographs one after another. A faint streak stretched like an arrow of light, stubbornly pointing straight back toward the sun, defying every model meant to explain it. Astonishment had now curdled into collective obsession. People no longer viewed Atlas with scientific detachment, but with the sensation that they were witnessing some colossal magic trick the universe was deliberately staging. Each evening, millions across the globe looked upward, waiting for something to happen. Would the tail snap off? Would it erupt? Would it transform into an even stranger shape? Suspicion crept into every thought. If what we see does not obey the rules, what else can we trust? In the scientific world, the pressure grew unbearable. Some researchers were forced to admit that the geometric illusion theory no longer sufficed to explain the anti-tail's sharpness and persistence. At an international conference, a renowned astrophysicist declared, "We may be confronting an entirely new kind of dust-plasma interaction, but it is also possible that our own senses are betraying us." The remark cut through the scientific community like a blade, spreading deeper unease. Meanwhile, the popular press seized on the ambiguity and fanned imagination. Tabloids christened Atlas the inverted torch, a symbol of cosmic upheaval. Television programs ran simulations of the comet's tail, turning into a luminous spear thrust defiantly toward the Sunday. The comet's strange beauty was celebrated, but always with an undercurrent of dread. Was this the sign of some greater event approaching in silence? In the realm of spirit and philosophy, the anti-tail became a metaphor. Thinkers wrote that it was proof of the fragility of perception. We are accustomed to believing the universe has order, yet Atlas shows us that order may only be illusion. And when illusion collapses, humanity will stumble into chaos. Such reflections were shared widely, as if everyone saw in that reversed tail a mirror of their own doubt. On moonless nights, when the sky was at its darkest, the anti-tail became even more haunting. No longer a faint streak, it appeared as a distinct path of light, tethering Atlas to the sun, a taut cord between distant cold and blazing fire. Many stood watching for hours, feeling themselves hypnotized. One journalist described it. "You know you are only looking at dust and light, yet in that moment you would swear something alive was moving within it." As Part 4 draws to a close, Atlas's anti-tail was no longer just an astronomical phenomenon. It had become a global emblem of suspicion, suspicion of the eyes, of theory, of the very certainty humanity had long clung to. In that backward light, humankind saw itself as small and powerless, an audience at a cosmic magic show, never truly sure what was real and what was deception. And Atlas's reversed tail still hung there, stubborn, defiant, asking, what can we dare believe when even the sky itself can turn its back on us? June 2026. While the world was still locked in debate over Atlas's reversed tail, the sky suddenly unveiled another spectacle so overwhelming, so implausible, that even the staunchest skeptics fell silent. Not one, not two, but an entire swarm of comets appeared, as if the universe had decided to send a chorus of actors onto the stage all at once. Across every continent, both amateur and professional telescopes confirmed the sight. Besides, Atlas, already infamous for its defiance of every rule, new luminous streaks flared into view. Names like Lemon, R2 Swan, and even nameless wanderers crowded together, painting the heavens with chaos unseen in living memory. Ordinarily, a single comet was enough to ignite a media frenzy, but this time, the sky resembled a cosmic traffic jam, dozens of bright trails crossing and colliding, each one dragging behind it a road of dust and plasma, like tangled highways of light gone astray. The first emotion was awe. Millions looked upward, unable to trust their own eyes. The beauty of a single comet, so often enough to humble humanity, was now multiplied into a sea of brilliance, like a fireworks display without end, but not of human design. One journalist described it, "I have seen thousands of fireworks light up Paris, but all of it was nothing compared to this." The sky was no longer the sky, it was a torn canvas, ripped open by streaks of green, white, gold, and red. But awe quickly gave way to the second emotion, suspicion. How could such timing be a coincidence? Why now, in this narrow window of months, should so many comets arrive at once? Scientists scrambled for theories. Perhaps the solar system was ploughing through an ancient debris field, or maybe Jupiter's gravity had tugged a swarm of smaller bodies into our path. The explanations sounded plausible, yet none erased the impression that something was deeply amiss. The beauty was too synchronized, too theatrical, leaving many with the unsettling sense that they were watching a script unfold, not a random event. The public began coining names for the spectacle: the cosmic locusts, the parade of lights, even the sky's warning. These labels were more than poetry. They revealed a collective unease that this swarm had not arrived merely to dazzle, but to signal. Since antiquity, whenever multiple heavenly bodies appeared together, people saw them as omens of upheaval. And in this modern era, after Atlas had already shattered humanity's faith in certainty, the timing of this celestial convergence was interpreted with an even sharper sense of destiny. On live television, an Italian professor exclaimed, "I have never seen the sky this chaotic. It's like an orchestra in which every instrument plays a different score, producing not harmony, but a terrifying noise." His words were quoted everywhere, for they captured precisely what millions felt: the impression of disorder, of a cosmos unraveling where once there had been balance and design. And amid this chaos, Atlas still stood apart, more radiant, more bizarre than the rest. Its eerie green glow, its defiant reversed tail, and now its commanding place at the center of the swarm made it impossible to ignore. Atlas looked like the leader, the conductor, or perhaps simply the strangest lamp among a forest of lights, forcing humanity to stare upward and ask, was this coincidence, or a grim message scripted by the universe itself? Within just the first 2 weeks of July 2026, the night sky was relentlessly crowded with streaks of light. No telescope was needed. Ordinary people could see several comets at once with the naked eye. Over the northern hemisphere, on certain nights, as many as 4 or 5 glowing trails ran parallel across the heavens, each spanning dozens of degrees, crisscrossing like fractures of light across a vast sheet of glass. The sight left people breathless with its grandeur, yet shivering with unease. In the cities, newspapers called it the season of a fractured sky. The phrase repeated over and over, as if humanity had stepped into the pages of an ancient prophecy long foretold. People dug back through the records of history, pulling out faded manuscripts of ancient civilizations, which described nights when many comets appeared at once, moments tied to famine, plague, or the collapse of dynasties. Modern science insisted these were coincidences, yet the human mind could not escape its shadows. What if this, too, was a destined omen. Anxiety flooded social media. Many confessed they could not sleep, unsettled by a sky that was too bright, too strange, like a curtain about to fall. Viral videos showed groups of people gathered outdoors, praying under the swarm, whispering pleas for the universe's mercy. Meanwhile, the younger generation turned the phenomenon into a trend, live streaming the comet swarm and calling it the universe's party. But even in their laughter, an undertone of worry lingered. Everyone knew this was no entertainment. It was chaos unfolding directly above humanity's head. In universities, emergency discussions were held day after day. A team of astronomers in the United States calculated that the orbits of at least 3 comets in the swarm could pass close to Earth's path within the next 2 years. They did not predict collisions, but emphasized that the risk had risen significantly. That warning spread instantly, shifting fear from vague unease to concrete dread. The celestial chaos might one day come crashing down to Earth. And still, Atlas was the centerpiece. Brighter than all the rest, its strange green glow marked it as the silent leader of the swarm. Some scientists speculated that Atlas might have gravitationally pulled dust and fragments, creating the illusion of accompanying comets. Others disagreed. There is no mechanism for a lone comet to summon an entire swarm. This is an extreme coincidence, and extreme coincidences sometimes point to a deeper law we have not yet seen. On the night of July 14th, the southern hemisphere reached a crescendo of disorder. 7 comets visible at once. The image raced across the globe, triggering a chain reaction. Millions poured into streets, onto rooftops, to beaches, abandoning their routines just to look up. The overwhelming sight brought many to tears, not of joy or sorrow, but of standing inside a moment that felt outside the measure of time. A writer captured it in words. It was the instant I realized humanity was smaller than meaningless. We were like ants, staring at the sky filled with swords of light, awaiting the universe's judgment. Suspicion only deepened. The more comets appeared, the less the cosmos seemed ordered. Instead, the heavens looked like a tangled matrix of luminous trails. The majesty of the sight did not soothe, but resembled a discordant symphony, hearts pounding faster in anxious rhythm. And in the middle of that chaos, Atlas shone like a symbol, a sign no one could decipher. Yet everyone felt carried by the weight of destiny. By mid-July 2026, the night sky had become the stage for a spectacle no earthly script could rival. With each passing night, the number of comets observed increased, as if an entire cosmic migration were pouring into the solar system. Observatories reported nearly 10 comets visible at once, many glowing brightly enough for the unaided eye. People described the sky as if it had been torn open, exposing a labyrinth of chaotic light. In New Delhi, thousands gathered on rooftops, sitting silently for hours to watch the swarm. A journalist recorded, "No one spoke, eyes locked on the heavens, stunned and trembling." That beauty was not joy, it was a sentence waiting to be read. In South America, collective prayer rituals spread along the coasts. People lit candles, raised their heads, and whispered that the swarm of comets was nothing less than a delegation of destiny. The unease seeped deep into the scientific community. While many clung to the explanation of a large-scale meteor shower, others admitted the coincidence was too unnatural. "It feels as though some door has opened, letting the whole flock rush in at once," confessed an astronomer in Canada. The image caught fire was Atlas, the invisible key that had unlocked that door. Once more, Atlas commanded the center. Amid the swarm, it still shone differently, its eerie green glow casting a halo that set it apart like a leader. Its anti-tail continued to point defiantly toward the sun, making its presence even more uncanny. While the other comets obeyed the rules, Atlas broke them, dragging behind it what looked like a retinue of light. Many began calling it the Alpha Comet, the one leading the chaotic herd into the solar system. On social media, conspiracy theories erupted. Some claimed Atlas was bringing with it a cosmic army, preparing for a great upheaval. Others compared the swarm to warning signals, each glowing trail a dot in some colossal sentence the universe was writing. Doubt slowly hardened into obsession. Once familiar order disappeared, any explanation, however wild, felt plausible. The beauty of the swarm, in its sheer multiplicity, only deepened the fear. In Rome, a composer described how staring at the sky felt like listening to a vast symphony, where every instrument played a different melody, creating a paradoxical roar. "It was so beautiful it brought me to tears," he said. Yet, at the same time, I felt as though I was listening to the music of the world's end. The sense of destiny grew heavier. People began linking the swarm to upheavals on Earth, earthquakes, massive storms, and political unrest. Though no scientific evidence tied the events together, the human mind eagerly wove them into a darker mosaic. To many, Atlas and the comet swarm had ceased to be mere astronomical events. They were signs, a signal that a new chapter of humanity was about to begin, though no one dared guess how it might end. In the midst of this turmoil, emotions filled every corner. Awe at the unprecedented spectacle, doubt about its true cause, anxiety over an uncertain future, and the haunting impression that the universe was sending a message written in light, in a language humanity had yet to decipher. By late July 2026, the night sky had been utterly transformed. The swarm of comets was no longer a fleeting event, but a constant spectacle, like a wound left unhealed across the fabric of the cosmos. Each night, the glowing trails returned, crisscrossing and overlapping, until even seasoned astronomers admitted they no longer knew where to find a stable point of reference. What had begun as awe had now hardened into deep unease. The press called it the month of omens, a phrase both sensational and eerily accurate in capturing the public mood. Ordinary people, who once cared little for astronomy, now felt a gnawing dread. Office workers on their way home would stop in the street, glance upward, and then hurry on, as if afraid the light above might be watching them. Collective prayers were held everywhere, from ancient churches in Europe to open-air plazas in South America. The atmosphere was thick with destiny, with the sense that the comets had not arrived by chance, but to signal a change beyond human grasp. Inside research centers, chaos reigned as well. Computers ran without pause, churning through orbital models, but the results shifted daily as new comets continued to appear. Reports piled up, yet instead of reassurance, they only underscored helplessness. A Japanese scientist confessed, "We are no longer observing a system. We are standing inside a storm of data, and it is that very excess which renders prediction meaningless." Atlas remained the brightest among the chaos. It stood at the heart of the swarm like a commander, carrying its eerie green glow and defiant anti-tail, leading many to believe that all of this revolved around it. In speeches, Atlas was invoked as the center of disorder, the shepherd of the flock, even the scribe writing a scripture in light. The obsession spread. People feared not just the chaos itself, but Atlas the comet that seemed to willfully create it. Anxiety reached its peak when a string of earthly calamities coincided with the celestial storm. Powerful hurricanes making landfall one after another, offshore earthquakes, and searing heat waves across Europe. Scientists insisted there was no causal link. Yet in the public mind, everything merged into a single narrative. The comet swarm was a message from the universe, warning humanity that an age of upheaval had already begun. On the night of July 28th, when the swarm reached a record-level luminous trails at once, the global social media feeds overflowed. "I've never seen the sky so chaotic. It's beautiful, but it hurts my heart. It feels like we are living inside the opening chapter of a new scripture." These were not mere comments, but whispers of a collective psyche, stunned, reverent, and afraid. As Part 5 closes, the comet swarm has ceased to be an astronomical phenomenon. It has become a living metaphor for chaos and fate. In that magnificent yet unsettling beauty, humanity glimpsed a cold truth. The universe can reveal its most dazzling face at the very moment it reminds us of our fragility. And at the center of this unruly canvas, Atlas still burned, like a suspended exclamation mark, forcing the entire world to keep asking, is this only a cosmic coincidence, or the first chapter of a script humanity was never meant to write? August 2026. While the comet swarm still scattered itself across the skies, a question began to creep into the closed-door discussions of the scientific community. What exactly is Atlas? For months, it had broken every familiar rule, its unnatural brightness, its surreal green glow, its defiant anti-tail, and now its commanding position at the center of a chaotic swarm. Each anomaly could be explained in isolation, yet the chain of strangeness, one after another, left many shaken to their core. At a conference in Geneva, a seasoned astrophysicist rose to his feet and said, "We must have the courage to face the possibility that Atlas is not entirely natural." The words thundered through the hall like a storm. The room fell silent, eyes avoiding one another. The thought did not simply test the limits of science, it trespassed into the forbidden. the prospect that Atlas might be the creation of an intelligence, not the blind product of nature. The media seized on the statement instantly. Headlines the next morning screamed, "Atlas, comet or probe? If not natural, then what? Are we witnessing alien technology?" Though scientists scrambled to cool the speculation, the tidal wave of news could not be contained. The public, already living under the shadow of Atlas-induced uncertainty, now spiraled into a new vortex of intellectual tension. Could the universe be revealing the hand of another intelligence right before our eyes? In Tokyo, a philosopher published an essay titled "The Collapse of Pure Nature." He wrote, "Throughout history, humanity has believed in immutable laws, but Atlas raises the possibility that the universe is not pure, that a hidden hand interferes. This is more dangerous than any celestial impact, for it undermines the very foundation of knowledge." His warning spread quickly, shared on social networks as a kind of crisis philosophy for the age. The public reacted with a mix of thrill and dread. Thrill at the thought that humanity might be witnessing the first evidence of alien technology. Dread at the idea that if true, Atlas was not just a stranger passing through the solar system, but perhaps an instrument sent with a purpose no one could fathom. Collective dreams surfaced again. People described seeing Atlas transform into a colossal eye, silently watching Earth. The vision left them shaken, haunted by the sense of being observed, of being studied as if humanity itself were nothing more than prey in some vast experiment. Governments began to grow uneasy. Classified intelligence reports leaked, revealing that interagency meetings had already been held under the scenario of "what if Atlas is artificial?" Hypotheticals were debated. If it were a probe, could it be contacted? If it carried technology, could it pose a threat? No one had answers, yet the very existence of such meetings was enough to heighten public anxiety. In that moment, Atlas was no longer just a comet. It had become a living riddle, where the boundary between science and science fiction dissolved, forcing humanity to confront a question as old as wonder itself: natural or artificial? And while no evidence yet leaned decisively to either side, the unease, the intellectual tension spread everywhere, like an invisible shroud tightening around every thought. Within a single month, the debate over Atlas's true nature spread across the globe like a storm no one could contain. Universities held back-to-back symposia, while the world's most prestigious newspapers splashed provocative headlines across their front pages. Atlas natural body or artificial construct? If not a comet, then what? The name Atlas was no longer tied solely to an astronomical phenomenon. It had become the epicenter of a collective intellectual crisis. Scientists split into two distinct camps. One side insisted Atlas was certainly natural, a comet with an unusual trajectory, explainable once enough data had been gathered. We were baffled by Halley, then by Shoemaker-Levy 9, and in the end we still found answers, an American professor argued. Atlas is simply nature's latest test. But the opposing camp rejected this outright. They pointed out that no comet had ever sustained such a prolonged green glow, no anti-tail had ever remained so steady, and no cosmic coincidence had ever produced a swarm of comets circling a single body. If we call this natural, a European astronomer countered, then we are redefining the very meaning of natural. He's not resurrected for them now. The confusion bled into those far beyond the scientific community. On television, talk shows dramatized the alien technology angle with animations of Atlas as a colossal spacecraft disguised beneath ice and dust. Some channels went further, overlaying fictional engine sounds onto footage of Atlas streaking across the sky, leaving viewers both thrilled and uneasy. Online forums buzzed with speculative videos claiming the green glow was not chemical at all, but the signature of an artificial energy field. In cafes, on sidewalks, in workplaces, the question, natural or artificial, became the default conversation. Some argued calmly, while others admitted trembling at the mere thought of artificiality, unable to sleep. A woman in Sao Paulo confessed during an interview, "If this is alien technology, then we are no longer the center of the story. We're just powerless spectators." That fear was not hers alone. It was becoming a collective feeling that humanity was now living under the gaze of another intelligence. Governments responded with visible strain. Several nations announced emergency observation programs, deploying satellites to track Atlas more closely. But the lack of clear data only deepened unease. Leaked documents revealed that certain defense agencies were preparing first contact scenarios, as if Atlas might suddenly alter its path and approach Earth. The news sparked small protests, where citizens demanded transparency, convinced their governments were hiding the truth about a cosmic surveillance craft. Amid this turbulence, a group of philosophers and sociologists offered a piercing observation. Even if Atlas is natural, it forces us to live in a state of permanent doubt, and that doubt itself is its greatest power. The remark spread like a diagnosis delivered without anesthesia. Humanity can confront danger, but living indefinitely with ambiguity that was a torment few could endure. Excitement and fear now mingled inseparably. Excitement at the possibility that we might be standing on the threshold of proof of another civilization. Fear that if true, it meant humanity was no longer alone in the cosmos, and that our counterpart might tower above us in every conceivable way. The question, is Atlas natural or artificial, was no longer a scientific puzzle. It had become a global test of spirit. Could humankind summon the courage to face the possibility that we were only bystanders in a far larger cosmic drama? By mid-September 2026, the debate over Atlas had reached its peak. Television, newspapers, and social media overflowed with overlapping simulations and clashing theories. In Washington, a live debate drew millions of viewers as three scientists faced off. One declared, "Atlas is natural. Every piece of evidence can be explained by classical physics." The second shot back, "No, this is the first case that forces us to consider artificiality." The third simply sighed, "Whatever it is, the real issue is that humanity is no longer certain of its own perception." His words echoed as the unwanted conclusion. Atlas had turned science into a crisis of belief. Within research circles, artificial hypotheses were dissected in growing detail. Some proposed that the strange green glow was not carbon emission at all, but a form of energy signaling. Others argued that the antitail was far too stable, resembling a structure deliberately maintained rather than the random drift of dust. A few ventured even further. Atlas might be an observation station, built to monitor Earth's development. These theories were dismissed by many as wild speculation, yet they also stirred both excitement and dread for the first time. Science and imagination were colliding openly on the world stage. Among the public, Atlas became a psychological symbol. Collective dreams persisted. Some saw Atlas transforming into a luminous eye. Others dreamed of it crashing down as a colossal steel sphere that opened into a radiant doorway. Psychologists dubbed it the Atlas syndrome, a condition where an object in the sky became a mirror for humanity's deepest fears and hopes. Hospitals reported patients admitted for anxiety, chronic insomnia, even panic attacks, triggered by the sight of the green glow above. Meanwhile, the entertainment industry exploited the phenomenon relentlessly. Documentaries, sci-fi films, and novels poured into the cultural bloodstream, depicting Atlas as a spacecraft, a colossal construct, a monument left behind by alien minds. Though works of art, they blurred the line between reality and speculation. One journalist wrote, "Atlas no longer resides only in the sky. It lives in the minds of billions, and in that realm, it is both miracle and menace." Confusion seeped into politics as well. Some Western lawmakers demanded expanded defense budgets, warning of the worst-case scenario. In Asia, a handful of governments quietly discussed launching spacecraft to observe Atlas directly, despite the staggering costs and risks. Each move, rather than reassuring the public, only poured fuel on the fire, for it showed that even those in power were no more certain than the people they governed. In everyday life, conversations about Atlas grew increasingly tense. A father told his child, "Don't be afraid, it's just a comet." But in his eyes, he didn't believe his own words. A student exclaimed, "If it's artificial, that means we're never alone. But if that's true, are we even safe anymore?" Such questions reverberated everywhere. Cafes, buses, school hallways, and all carried the same refrain. Intellectual tension had become the air humanity now breathed. In this atmosphere, Atlas was no longer a distant object. It had become a test of spirit. Could humankind remain steady while living with uncertainty? Or would we destroy ourselves under the weight of fear? And as night fell, its green light still hung in the sky, cold, patient, and unyielding like a question mark that refused to be answered. By late September 2026, as autumn nights grew longer, Atlas still lingered in the sky with its green light undiminished. The persistence of its presence made the question, natural or artificial, more haunting than ever. It was like a riddle written by the cosmos, but instead of offering clues, Atlas remained silent, leaving humanity to argue in the tightening grip of collective tension. In New York, an international conference gathered hundreds of scientists, philosophers, and politicians. For days, presentations followed one after another. Some dissected spectral data, others proposed mathematical models, while a few dared to ask the question outright: if Atlas is artificial, what is its purpose? The room fell into a heavy silence. That question was like a sharpened blade cutting through the safe walls of science, exposing a primal fear. Were we being watched, or worse, experimented upon by an unknown intelligence? Beyond those halls, the public swayed between thrill and panic. Polls showed nearly half the world's population believed Atlas had artificial elements. Analysts were startled. Confidence in science seemed to waver in the very heart of the 21st century. On social media, videos spread at light speed. Some portrayed Atlas as a colossal ship. Others animated it opening into a radiant doorway, revealing strange metallic structures. Even though people knew these were only fabrications, millions watched and debated, because Atlas's ambiguity had become fertile ground for collective imagination. In Rome, a special prayer service was held in St. Peter's Square. Tens of thousands knelt, eyes fixed on the sky, pleading that whoever made Atlas, if such a being existed, might forgive and protect them. The event was broadcast worldwide, a scene both solemn and chilling. Humanity, in an age of technology, still bowing before a streak of uncertain light in the heavens, just as their ancient ancestors once trembled beneath eclipses. In the scientific world, tension had escalated beyond theory. Some research groups secretly submitted proposals to launch spacecraft toward Atlas, regardless of the risks. Their argument was simple: only by seeing it up close can we end this crisis of belief. But governments hesitated. If Atlas truly were artificial, an approach might be perceived as provocation. The fear of touching alien technology weighed on every decision, as if each step forward was taken on fragile ice. Meanwhile, philosophers offered an even darker scenario. The danger is not that Atlas is artificial. The danger is that we may never know for certain whether it is or not. That eternal uncertainty will slowly erode humanity's faith in the universe, in science, and in its own senses. The statement sent chills through the public, for it outlined a grim possibility. Humanity would not be destroyed by a celestial collision, but by an unending corrosion of trust in its own reality. As Part 6 closes, Atlas remains shining, silent, suspended in the sky like an unanswered question. Earth continues its orbit, people continue to argue and tremble, while that green streak hangs unchanging, an enigmatic glyph carved into the heavens. And in the hearts of billions, the same question resounds: is Atlas a gift of nature, or a message from a mind far beyond our own? No one has the answer. There is only the growing unease, as if humanity were living in the suspended moment before the pronouncement of an invisible verdict. October 2026. While the debate over natural or artificial still burned fiercely, another hypothesis unexpectedly rose to the surface, shifting the perspective of the entire scientific community. The debris field hypothesis. According to it, Atlas was not a solitary stranger, but merely a fragment within a vast chaos of remnants left behind by ancient collisions. New data from space telescopes revealed that the region through which Atlas was traveling contained an unusually high density of small bodies. Dust grains, shards of rock, fleeting streaks of light, all suggested that Atlas might be leading or simply caught within a debris field stretching across millions of kilometers. Reconstructed imagery portrayed a scene like a celestial river, with Atlas standing out as the most radiant iceberg drifting on its surface. The discovery sent shivers down many spines. If the hypothesis was correct, then Atlas was not the only anomaly, but simply the figurehead of an entire army of fragments sweeping through the solar system, all mixed with dread and sorrow. The universe did not require alien intelligence to sow fear. Nature itself, with its cold brutality, was more than enough to leave humanity trembling. At scientific conferences, researchers recalled lessons from history. They spoke of the colossal impact 65 million years ago, when an asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs and cleared the way for humans to appear. They cited the hypothesis that the Moon was born from a primordial collision when a Mars-sized planet slammed into the early Earth. These reminders rang out like chilling bells. the universe had repeatedly used violence to shape destiny. And if Atlas was merely a signpost of another drifting debris field, then humanity was living in a fragile moment of chance, waiting to see if it would become the next casualty. In the public imagination, the debris field took on the image of a cosmic graveyard, a colossal field of bones scattered across the void, remnants of planets, comets, and worlds long destroyed, ground into fragments and dissolved into endless space. That vision instilled in people an unprecedented sense of smallness. We, with all our civilization, seemed like nothing more than dust motes, desperately trying to carve out meaning in a universe indifferent to our existence. Contemplation became the prevailing mood. Atlas, once seen only as a disruptor, now appeared as a messenger of cosmic cruelty, a mindless shard, yet carrying a message clear enough. This universe was not designed to be gentle with life, and in that cold indifference, humanity was forced to confront the question, do we have the courage to keep seeking meaning, when meaning itself could be crushed at any moment beneath the weight of ancient fragments? By late October 2026, as additional data were released, the debris field hypothesis grew even more compelling. Infrared spectral images revealed that along Atlas's orbital path, the density of dust and small meteoroids increased dramatically, stretching out like a dim grey cloud. One scientist described it vividly. Atlas is like a ghost ship drifting through a cosmic graveyard, dragging behind it the phantoms of shattered worlds from the dawn of time. That image spread instantly, inspiring in the public both awe and dread. In the press, the phrase debris field was soon replaced by a more evocative label, the graveyard of the cosmos. Journalists stressed that we were not merely watching a lone comet, but witnessing a cross-section of merciless history. Billions of years of collisions, pulverization, and expulsion, where life, if it ever appeared, was nothing more than a brief flame snuffed out by the wind. Faced with that concept, people suddenly felt fragile in ways they never had before. Towering skyscrapers, radiant cities, the proud monuments of civilization, all seemed like sandcastles waiting for a violent wave to erase them. In Paris, an art exhibition opened under the title Bones of the Sky. It displayed hundreds of paintings imagining the debris field. Visitors walked through darkened rooms where ceilings projected swirling images of frozen rock, storming like a cosmic tempest. Many left in tears, not from fear of an immediate catastrophe, but from a deep, aching sorrow, the realization that this universe, in all its magnificent beauty, carried within it an immeasurable cruelty. That sense of awe only deepened when astronomical historians recalled the collisions that had shaped Earth itself. They spoke of the Chicxulub impact that wiped out the dinosaurs, of meteor storms that once incinerated primeval forests, and of the thousands of smaller meteors that still burn up silently in our skies every year. These reminders made the public shudder. Humanity had survived only by the thinnest strand of luck, a strand that could snap at any moment if another great fragment strayed off course. By tracing a trail of debris behind it, Atlas had transformed ancient memory into a haunting presence in the now. In South Africa, a philosopher declared, "Atlas reminds us that life is not the center of the universe. It is a rare exception, indulged for a fleeting instant, in a cosmos more accustomed to destruction than to nurturing." His words sparked fierce debate, but also resonated with a shared contemplation. The violence of the universe requires no reason, and humankind may be nothing more than a trembling spark in the storm of an endless debris field. When night fell, millions across the world still lifted their eyes toward Atlas. But their gaze was no longer filled with curiosity alone. It carried a quiet sadness, as if looking into a mirror that reflected their own fragility. And in that silence, one question echoed in countless hearts. If the universe is this brutal by nature, can humanity ever truly find meaning? Or are all our efforts merely illusions, waiting to be ground into fragments like everything else that came before us? By early November 2026, global attention on Atlas had reached its peak. The debris field hypothesis was no longer a matter of pure science. It had become a haunting obsession shared by humanity. Space telescope images have now made it plain. Atlas was plowing through a region thick with fragments. Rocks of varying sizes drifted slowly but menacingly, like a herd of invisible beasts lurking in the dark. Scientists calculated that if even a single fragment, just a few hundred meters across, were to break from this stream and veer toward Earth, the outcome would be catastrophic. Computer models showed the horror in chilling detail. tsunamis rising hundreds of meters, forests consumed in flames, skies shrouded for years in fine dust. These simulations aired on international television, leaving millions frozen in silence before their screens. No one spoke, no one laughed. Fear and awe mingled into a collective stillness, as though the entire planet had gathered for a memorial service for its own future. In classrooms, teachers used the moment to explain Earth's violent history of impacts. Students listened as they learned how our planet had been knocked down and reborn many times. But instead of sparking curiosity, the lessons often ended in silence. One 14-year-old finally whispered, "If the universe killed the dinosaurs, why has it spared us? And do we even deserve to be spared?" The question cut through the room like a cold blade, exposing the buried sorrow that humanity's existence might be nothing more than the brief delay of an inevitable sentence. Meanwhile, ancient rituals resurfaced around the world. In Peru, communities gathered on high plateaus, lighting torches and chanting old songs, treating Atlas as a messenger of destructive gods. In Northern Europe, candlelit prayers filled cathedrals as people recited verses about the Day of Judgment. Strangely, though cultures differed, the emotion was the same: reverence for the universe's violence and the crushing smallness of humanity when it looked up at the sky. On social media, depictions of the debris field spread like wildfire. People compared it to battlefields strewn with corpses, to seas of bleached bones, to cities reduced to ruins after war. The cold beauty of cosmic wreckage became a metaphor for the merciless chaos that the universe had scattered across billions of years. And within that metaphor, humanity suddenly saw itself as nothing more than a fleeting spark, a rough draft easily erased. Atlas remained at the center. No longer viewed as a strange outlier, it now appeared as the guide of the entire debris field, a banner of light waving in an invisible storm. The image sent shivers through many. Perhaps Atlas had not come to raise questions, but to remind us that the universe was far more accustomed to destruction than to life. And so, from a brilliant comet, Atlas had become a mirror reflecting humanity's fragility. Each night, as people looked up, they saw not just a streak of light, but the dim outline of their own future. A day when everything we have built may crumble into dust, joining the endless debris field, vanishing without a trace. By late November 2026, the debris field hypothesis had become the dominant lens through which humanity viewed Atlas. The question was no longer whether it was natural or artificial, but the colder vision it revealed. Atlas was merely a prominent shard within an invisible river of destruction that the universe had quietly sustained for billions of years. Newly released orbital maps showed a band stretching millions of kilometers around Atlas, filled with countless objects of varying size. Scientists called it an ancient debris stream, likely born from some primordial explosion or collision in the early solar system. Computer reconstructions rendered the scene in stark detail. Colossal rocks tumbling through darkness, colliding, shattering, and dissolving into the silent echoes of death. It was enough to take one's breath away. For if even a single fragment were to shift course, Earth could instantly become the stage for a catastrophe no less devastating than those that erased prehistoric worlds. Within this atmosphere, curiosity gave way to reverence and sorrow. One journalist wrote, "We like to call the universe our common home, but in truth it is more like a battlefield, a merciless one, where life itself is only a fragile exception." The words struck like a shockwave, for they tapped into a fear everyone carried, that humanity's existence might be nothing more than a fleeting stroke of luck in an endless graveyard. In great cities, silent gatherings spread. People sat on grass fields, along rivers, or atop rooftops, speaking no words, only gazing at Atlas. Some whispered that its green glow no longer seemed beautiful, but like a funeral candle, illuminating the mortality of humankind. Fear no longer erupted as panic. It sank inward, transforming into a quiet grief. The grief of realizing one's smallness before the violence of the cosmos. In schools, teachers encouraged students to keep journals about Atlas. Many of their writings left adults speechless. "If Earth is shattered, who will remember us?" wrote a 13-year-old. Another penned, "Perhaps Atlas is the tombstone of the universe, reminding us that everything will break apart." These lines revealed how deeply the debris field hypothesis had seeped into the collective psyche, not as science alone, but as a living symbol of impermanence. At public forums, philosophers and priests sat at the same tables, conceding one common point: Atlas forced humanity to face the truth that meaning is not a gift bestowed by the universe, but something we must create ourselves, even in the face of a cosmos that remains indifferent. In this moment, reflection reached its height. Life carries no guarantees, and precisely because of that, it becomes infinitely precious. And so, as the final nights of November unfolded, Atlas still hung there motionless, cold, like a sentinel standing guard over a cosmic graveyard. People looked up and saw clearly. The universe makes no promises of safety. It only bears its brutality in silence. The question was no longer where Atlas came from, but how we, the fragile beings on this small blue world, would choose to live, knowing that at any moment, we too could become nothing more than fragments swept away in the endless current. December 2026. The night sky still carried the cold green glow of Atlas, but now humanity looked at it through a new lens. The Scout theory. No longer seen as just a strange comet, Atlas was increasingly imagined as a cosmic eye, an object sent to watch, to record, and perhaps to prepare for something beyond imagination. The origins of this theory trace back to a modest study published by a group of young astronomers in Switzerland. They compared Atlas with Oumuamua, the interstellar object that had stunned the scientific community in 2017. Like its predecessor, Atlas displayed puzzling behavior, speeds that did not fully align with predictions, a trajectory that seemed to undergo subtle adjustments at different stages, and above all, a chain of anomalies that had followed it for months. Its unnatural green light, its defiant anti-tail, its role as the centerpiece of the comet swarm, and its apparent link to a debris field. Each phenomenon could be explained in isolation, but when taken together, they resembled deliberate actions more than the randomness of nature. The paper ended with a chilling line: "If Atlas is natural, it is a miraculous exception. But if it is not natural, then the most reasonable possibility is this: it is observing us." Within days, those words were translated into dozens of languages, printed in newspapers, shared endlessly online, and ignited the world's imagination like a match thrown into dry grass. Media outlets immediately seized on the theory. Evening news broadcasts mentioned the Scout theory every night, while special programs reconstructed Atlas as a colossal sphere of light, inside which a dark pupil loomed, staring down at Earth. On social media, graphic artists produced thousands of images. Atlas as a cold green eye, Atlas as a cosmic machine turning hidden lenses. The beauty of these images only deepened the unease. People began to believe they were being watched. Psychologists soon recorded the spread of a new phenomenon, the cosmic eye syndrome. Those who experienced it admitted they felt Atlas watching them daily. Some even changed their habits, walking more slowly, speaking more softly, moving with unusual caution, as though a vast camera hovered above the world. A few confessed that whenever they looked up at Atlas, they felt guilt, as if every small flaw and private mistake was being exposed under its emerald glow. Meanwhile, government slipped into quiet tension. In Washington, an emergency meeting was convened with national security agencies. A leaked report revealed the scenarios being debated. If Atlas were artificial, could it be collecting intelligence? If it transmitted signals elsewhere, who would be receiving them? And the most terrifying question of all, if Atlas were a scout, what would come after the scout? At the United Nations, a closed-door meeting was also held. Some countries proposed sending a response signal, a greeting, or at least an acknowledgement that humanity was aware of its presence. But almost instantly, other delegations pushed back fiercely. We don't know who we'd be greeting. What if it is an invitation to a power beyond our comprehension? The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood that the question was not merely scientific but existential. For the public, the Scout theory was both intoxicating and terrifying. Online forums overflowed with speculation. Some called Atlas the cosmic eye of God. Others dubbed it an interstellar spy. And some even believed humanity was being tested as if part of a vast laboratory experiment set by the universe itself. No matter how bold or bizarre, every idea found believers, because the sense of being watched had sunk deep into the collective mind. At nightfall, when silence descended, people stood on balconies or sat in open fields, gazing at Atlas suspended above. In those moments, a chilling feeling spread among them, that all of humanity's secrets, its hidden fears, its unspoken desires, were already contained within that invisible gaze. Atlas, in the imagination of the world, was no longer a comet. It was a cold, patient eye, fixed upon us without offering the comfort of explanation. Within just 2 weeks of the first paper's release, the scout theory had erupted into a global wave. Mainstream media, once hesitant to discuss the possibility of alien engineering, now compete to exploit the theme like a fever. Television networks produced lengthy features, simulating Atlas unfolding like a colossal machine, antennas extending from its icy shell to harvest data from Earth. Science fiction magazines illustrated Atlas as a mechanical eye, drifting coldly through space, silently recording every heartbeat of humankind. For the public, these images were both chilling and mesmerizing. In New York, an art exhibition opened under the theme, The Eye in the Sky, where visitors entered darkened rooms, saturated with giant projections of Atlas. The ceiling mimicked the night sky, while at the center of the gallery stood a blazing green sphere, pulsing as though it were tracking each step of those inside. Many attendees confessed upon leaving that their hearts were racing unnaturally, as if Atlas's gaze had pierced them all the way through. Across major cities, strange social behaviors began to surface. People laughed less on the streets, spoke in softer tones, and many admitted they felt as if they were living inside a colossal laboratory where every move was being recorded. Psychologists called this a natural reaction to the sensation of an invisible eye watching, a state that compels humans to self-adjust even without hard evidence. Inside the scientific community, the divide deepened. One camp dismissed the scout theory as nothing more than overstimulated imagination. "We cannot call every anomaly artificial," declared an astrophysicist at Oxford. But the opposing camp, now swelling in number, countered, "If Atlas is natural, it is the exception of all exceptions, and when exceptions pile up, the possibility of intention can no longer be ruled out." Debates were broadcast live, attracting millions of viewers, playing out like sporting matches, where every argument left audiences holding their breath. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of politics, a quiet dread was growing. Memos leaked from various defense and security agencies revealed a haunting scenario. If Atlas were a scout, its mission might not be limited to observation, but to preparing for the arrival of something far greater. The very term scout conjured direct military images someone sent ahead to survey, to report, to clear the way, and that image planted a latent terror, that humanity was no longer the protagonist of its own story, but merely a subject under surveillance before the real narrative began. On social media, imagination exploded. Some artists depicted Atlas firing beams of light across Earth's surface like a planetary-scale scanner. Others created simulated videos of it sending streams of light back to a distant star system, with captions like "Target Planet Ready." Even though these visions were fictional, they sent a shiver down people's spines. We are being watched, and we do not know by whom. On the night of December 20, as Atlas shone brighter than usual, global feeds flooded with posts. "It's looking at me. Feels like someone's standing right behind me." No one escapes that gaze. These whispers read like the synchronized heartbeat of humanity, anxious, breathless, haunted by the notion that Atlas was no mindless lump of ice and dust, but the cold eye of an alien intelligence tracking our every breath. In the final days of December 2026, the clearer the winter skies became, the more starkly Atlas stood out. Its cold green glow hung in the darkness, no longer evoking mystery but resembling a signal light blinking with patient precision. For many, the feeling was unmistakable. Atlas had become a colossal camera, watching the entire planet. In Berlin, a team of sociologists released a survey. More than 60% of respondents believed Atlas might be observing Earth in some way. The figure sent shockwaves through the public sphere. It proved the scout theory had spilled beyond scientific circles and taken root as a shared belief. The media immediately dubbed it the trust shock, the moment when modern humanity, so accustomed to living in a rational world, openly admitted it felt stared at from the distant sky. Anxiety began to seep into daily life. Psychologists reported rising rates of insomnia, with many people dreaming of Atlas transforming into a vast eye, wide open, recording every gesture. Some tech companies noted that their employees were showing less creativity, afraid to take risks, as if even failed experiments would be remembered by some alien intelligence. What psychologists called the eye effect. The tendency to alter behavior when one feels watched had now become a global reality. On the political stage, tensions escalated sharply. In Washington, lawmakers demanded increased defense budgets, warning that Atlas might be an interstellar spy, paving the way for another force. In Beijing, closed-door meetings debated whether to launch armed satellites to monitor Atlas, preparing for the worst-case scenario. Meanwhile, the European Union urged absolute silence, fearing that any transmitted signal could be misread as provocation. The world had fallen into a paradox. Everyone was afraid, yet no one knew precisely what to fear. In cultural spaces, the scout theory set imagination ablaze. Short films, graphic novels, and books flooded the market, depicting Atlas as a watchful eye, an ancient outpost dispatched by a long-dead civilization. Scenarios proliferated. Atlas might not just be observing, but evaluating. If Earth passed the test, it might signal contact. If not, it would drift away silently, leaving humanity in eternal unease. But this explosion of imagination carried its own hidden terror. In Tokyo, countless teenagers posted videos describing their obsession. I stepped onto my balcony and saw it there. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I felt guilty, as if Atlas knew the darkest corners of my thoughts. The confession went viral, shared millions of times, because it articulated what so many had been unwilling to say. Atlas had touched the deepest fear within the human psyche, the fear of being fully exposed. Amid this atmosphere, one question grew louder. If Atlas was a scout, who was it reporting to? Was there an intelligence out there, seated in the cosmic shadows, watching a galactic screen, studying humanity as we study ants? Or was Atlas merely an automated device, wandering for millions of years, storing information to transmit when the chance arose? Both possibilities made hearts race for whether watched by a living intelligence or exposed to a blind, unfeeling program. The vulnerability felt the same. Through its patient silence, Atlas had transformed humanity's thrill and unease into a constant state of existence. No one dared insist it was only a comet, yet no one could confirm it was a scout either. And it was this ambiguity that proved most terrifying. The unknown kills peace of mind faster than any visible danger ever could. As the final days of 2026 arrived, and the world stepped into its season of festivities, the atmosphere ordinarily drenched in joy was overshadowed by the cold green glow in the sky. Atlas, silent and unyielding, had become a reverse Christmas star, not a beacon of hope, but a constant reminder of an unblinking gaze. Crowded squares and brightly lit avenues still carried the same rhythm of celebration, but in every gathering, countless eyes suddenly lifted toward that distant streak of light, then quickly looked away, as though afraid their glance might itself be recorded. The international press dubbed it the holiday season beneath the cosmic eye. Special broadcasts captured the strange synchronicity of humanity. From New York to Tokyo to Nairobi, people paused to stare at Atlas in the same way as if awaiting judgment. One journalist wrote, "This is the strangest moment in history. 7 billion human beings feel observed by the same unknown object in the sky." Inside research institutes, debates grew more heated. One camp argued that if Atlas truly was a scout, its mission must already be complete. All the data it needed would have been transmitted long ago, which meant humanity was now living only in the waiting period, awaiting the response. The opposing camp countered with a darker fear. If it is a scout, why has it not left? Why does it remain? Perhaps it is still watching, still evaluating, deciding something about us. That question froze entire rooms into silence, for no one wished to imagine humanity sitting an exam graded by a cosmic intelligence, its results yet to be revealed. Among the public, fascination mixed with dread. Online forums overflowed with speculation. Some believed Atlas was measuring Earth's environment in preparation for contact. Others feared it was a forward scout for a larger fleet yet to come. A few even claimed it had already been intervening, that recent storms, earthquakes, and climate extremes were subtle signs from the unseen observer. There was no proof for any of it, but that was the most unsettling fact of all. Atlas's silence left every possibility open, and in that silence, imagination thrived unchecked. In several cities, new rituals were born. People lit candles, tilted their faces skyward, and whispered, "If you are watching, know that we seek peace." Sociologists marveled at how, in just a few months, Atlas had reshaped collective belief, transformed from an astronomical anomaly into an invisible spiritual presence, a vessel where humanity placed both its fear and its fragile hope. Governments, meanwhile, grew increasingly uneasy. Leaked documents revealed that many nations had already conducted quiet discussions on first contact scenarios. But that phrase alone was enough to ignite waves of anxiety. What did contact mean? A meeting of peace or the unveiling of a power thousands of times stronger than our own? Would humanity have any agency at all? Or were we merely the subjects of a silent scout's report? When the clock struck midnight and the new year arrived, millions lifted their eyes skyward together. Fireworks erupted across continents, streaking the heavens with bursts of colour, but the artificial brilliance paled against Atlas's steady green glow. In that instant, the shared sensation was not joy, but a choking anticipation, as though the world itself stood at the closing lines of one chapter, waiting for the next page to turn. Part 8 ends suspended in that tension. Atlas remained silent, patient, immovable, like the eye of the cosmos fixed upon us. No one knew whether it was simply watching or preparing for something else. But one truth had already crystallized. Once the feeling of being observed becomes the shared breath of humanity, then, regardless of what Atlas really is, it has already changed us forever. January 2027. The winter sky stretched vast, cold, and silent, yet the green glow of Atlas turned it into a canvas brimming with questions more urgent than ever before. After months of debate over its nature, whether comet, scout, or relic of ancient debris, humanity began to place Atlas inside a broader philosophical frame, the Fermi paradox. Since 1950, when physicist Enrico Fermi suddenly posed the deceptively simple question, if the universe is teeming with life, then where is everybody? Humanity has never stopped wrestling with it. Scientists have long estimated that within our own Milky Way, there are hundreds of billions of stars and billions of planets situated in so-called habitable zones. The odds of life existing elsewhere are virtually certain, and yet, for over half a century, all we have received is silence. Atlas, with its strangeness and unanswered mysteries, suddenly became a mirror for that paradox. For many, it felt like a potential candidate for the first reply. If it truly carried traces of another civilization, whether artificially engineered or subtly guided, then it would mean we are not alone. But if Atlas ultimately proved to be nothing more than a natural product of physics, then the silence of the heavens grew even more terrifying. It would serve as a bitter reminder that perhaps we are merely a fragile exception in an otherwise indifferent sea. The presence of Atlas stirred two opposing tides of feeling. On one side was hope that we might be on the brink of witnessing history, when the Fermi paradox would be answered at last with undeniable evidence. That humanity would no longer stand solitary, that life was not confined to this pale blue dot. But alongside hope came dread. If Atlas was truly a sign of other intelligence, then what was its purpose? Did its observation mean welcome, or was it the opening move of a story we would rather not imagine? And if it remained silent, was that silence itself a rejection, or worse, the cold indifference of a universe unwilling to care? In Rome, a public forum drew thousands who crowded into a vast hall. An elderly philosopher spoke slowly. Perhaps the problem is not that they do not exist, but that we are not yet ready to recognize them. Atlas, with all its strangeness, may be the first test to see if we are mature enough to step out of cosmic isolation. The words echoed through the chamber, and the silence that followed was broken only by applause and muffled sobs. It was not just a theory they heard, but the primordial longing of humankind, the desire to know that our existence has meaning in the grand design. In Seoul, a group of artists staged a performance titled Silence and the Answer. The theatre's ceiling was transformed into a star-strewn sky, with Atlas simulated as a blazing green point at the center. Around it, thousands of dim stars flickered in silence. The audience stood beneath it, swallowed by a paradox made visual. Why, among countless stars, did only this one point command all our attention? And was it an answer, or simply an illusion magnified by human yearning? Philosophers began calling Atlas a cosmic mirror because it forced humanity to confront itself. Fermi once asked, "Where is everybody?" But now, the question had shifted. Who are we, if there is no one else? Atlas, by remaining silent, trapped us in a cruel bind. Whether there is an answer or not, both possibilities leave us trembling. If there are others, we must accept that we are not the center. If there are none, then we must face the abyss of loneliness and the crushing responsibility that the only meaning in this universe might lie in our hands alone. On winter nights, millions around the world lifted their eyes to Atlas. Some prayed quietly, that it carried a message of peace. Others feared that any signal it sent might summon disaster. Yet whether hope or dread, the feeling was the same. Atlas had transformed the Fermi paradox from a distant question in textbooks into a vivid, living experience inscribed across our night sky. As January wore on, debates over Atlas and the Fermi paradox grew more intense than ever. Universities organized public forums, television channels devoted hours of live coverage, and on social media, millions joined in the conversation. Atlas had become the catalyst that revived the old theories of the Fermi paradox, but this time with a living dimension. People were no longer discussing abstract possibilities. They were speaking about a reality hanging visibly in the night sky. One of the most frequently cited ideas was the notion that we are too small to notice. Perhaps in the vast ocean of civilizations, humanity is nothing more than a faint droplet, too insignificant to draw attention. Under this view, Atlas is not a message directed at us, but simply a passing spark in the endless storm. The thought carried a quiet sadness, yet it also seeded a kind of comfort. If we are unimportant, then perhaps we are not the target of any looming threat. The second hypothesis was far darker, that every other civilization has already vanished. According to this view, the universe was once crowded with voices, but over billions of years, war, catastrophe, or the sheer cruelty of nature silenced them all. Atlas, in this frame, resembles a leftover trace, a shard of evidence from a world that has already collapsed. Silence, then, does not mean there was no one, but rather, there were too many, and they all fell into the dark. This vision filled people with dread, but also with a fierce determination to protect the fragile flame of our own civilization. Another idea, more optimistic, was the cosmic zoo. Higher civilizations, it suggested, might be watching Earth deliberately, but choosing silence, allowing us to evolve naturally, much like humans observing animals in their habitat without interference. Atlas, in this scenario, becomes less of a threat and more of a patient gatekeeper, recording the growth of humankind. The image gave many a surge of cautious hope. Perhaps silence was not rejection, but a subtle form of care. Yet even here, unease lingered, for when we grow large enough, will the silence end in a handshake or in a cold, dismissive glance? More extreme hypotheses also entered the debate. Some scientists revived the chilling notion of the Great Filter, the idea that every civilization faces an overwhelming trial, one so unforgiving that nearly all perish before advancing far. If Atlas is a sign that another intelligence once passed through that filter, then it is also a warning. We may be approaching our own threshold of danger. Reading such analyses left people torn between curiosity and dread, their imaginations caught between awe and foreboding. Whatever the theory, Atlas became the common point of reference. It anchored abstract speculation in the immediacy of lived experience. Every gaze turned upward was no longer just about asking, "Is there anyone out there?" but also about whispering, "How long will we survive in this play?" And strangely, instead of sinking into despair, these debates lit a fragile hope. Hope that if the Fermi paradox could be answered through Atlas, we might finally understand our place. Hope that, within the suffocating silence, Atlas might serve as the first greeting, or at the very least, a reminder that we are not entirely forgotten. Yet layered beneath this fragile hope was a quiet, unshakable anxiety. For whichever way the answer came, yes or no, it carried the weight to redefine the entire future of humankind. In the midweeks of January 2027, Atlas was no longer just a scientific topic. It had seeped into every layer of culture and the spiritual life of humankind, becoming a symbol both mystical and philosophical. Discussions about the Fermi paradox were no longer confined to lecture halls but echoed in cafes, at concerts, and even within religious ceremonies. Atlas had become a collective mirror, forcing humanity to confront the nature of its own existence. In Buenos Aires, a symphony orchestra premiered a new piece titled "The Silence of the Stars." The music moved slowly, punctuated by long pauses, pulling the audience into an experience both beautiful and unsettling. Each note seemed written as a question. If the universe is truly crowded with life, why do we still only hear the echo of our own voices? When the final chord faded, the lights went out, leaving only the image of Atlas projected on the ceiling, silent, glowing. Thousands of listeners sat motionless. No one dared to applaud right away. They understood that what they had just heard was not merely music, but philosophy expressed through sound. In Egypt, a group of Islamic scholars drew parallels between the Fermi paradox and a theological question. If God created an infinite universe, why would life exist only on Earth? To them, Atlas could be a reminder that divine creation is never confined to a single place. Meanwhile, in Christian churches across Europe, winter sermons began to mention Atlas as a symbol of waiting and hope, not the Star of Bethlehem, but still a guiding light, urging humanity to look higher, further than themselves. Online, young philosophers began to call Atlas an existential mirror. One essay read, "The Fermi paradox doesn't only ask about the others, it asks about us. If the universe beyond is empty, then we might become either the first voice or the last." Atlas reminds us that the answer isn't written in the sky, but in how we choose to live. The piece was shared millions of times, proof that a once-distant paradox had become a deeply personal story for each individual. Visual artists, too, found new inspiration. In Nairobi, an exhibition titled "We Are the Exception" displayed paintings of Earth as a tiny green island adrift in a sea of blackness, with Atlas glowing in the distance like an observing eye. Visitors felt both pride in the miracle of life here and a trembling sense of latent loneliness. The exhibition ended with a single large mirror, where attendees saw their own reflections. Its message was simple yet haunting. If the universe is silent, then meaning lies within your eyes. Itaminsa. In philosophy classes, Atlas became the spark of heated debate. Teachers no longer asked their students merely, "Is there anyone out there?" Instead, they asked, "If there is no one else, do you dare to bear the responsibility of being the only voice?" Many students began writing journals, expressing a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism. If we are the exception, then humanity's mission is to protect life, to plant seeds of meaning in a silent cosmos. Though traces of anxiety remained, each page still carried glimmers of hope, that human beings could transform solitude into an opportunity for creation. Gradually, Atlas had been remade by humanity into a symbol with many meanings. At once, the fear of abandonment and the spark of hope that life is not futile. It was no longer just a physical phenomenon, but a living philosophical framework. Every person, every culture, every community saw in Atlas a reflection of their own desires and anxieties. And perhaps that multiplicity of meanings was itself the most profound answer the Fermi paradox could ever offer. That significance lies not only in whether someone is out there, but in how we choose to live within the silence. By late January 2027, as the long, cold nights cloaked the northern hemisphere, the sky seemed quieter than ever. Yet that very silence only made Atlas more striking, a cold green dot suspended in the void. People began to realize that the Fermi paradox was no longer a dry question from textbooks, but a living experience tied to the rhythm of humanity's collective heartbeat. At international conferences, scientists and philosophers sat side by side, debating with intensity. Some argued that Atlas proved the hypothesis that the universe is silent because we are not yet mature enough to join the great conversation. Others countered, "No, Atlas simply underlines the futility of the search, that we are sending questions into an emptiness where no one listens." And yet, despite their differences, all agreed on one point. The presence of Atlas had transformed how we understood the Fermi paradox. It was no longer a matter of statistics, it had become a question about the very meaning of human existence. In many places, Atlas became a catalyst for a new optimism. Writers, artists, and even community leaders began to speak more often about humanity's responsibility. "If we are one of the rare voices in the universe," a speaker in Toronto declared, "then precisely because of that, we must live with dignity. We do not exist only for ourselves. We are representatives of the possibility that the universe can produce meaning." Those words resonated deeply, planting hope in people's hearts that the silence beyond was not an ending, but an opening and invitation for humanity to compose the first notes of a cosmic symphony, still waiting for its melody. At the same time, unease lingered. Philosophers warned that if the Fermi paradox truly held, then our existence might be far more fragile than we imagined. The great filter, the hypothesis that every civilization eventually meets an insurmountable trial, was invoked again with a heavier tone. In this view, Atlas could be a cold reminder. If the stars are silent, perhaps it is because every other civilization has already failed, and humanity is now nearing the same cliff. And yet, strangely, that fear did not extinguish the will to endure. Instead, it fueled a stronger hunger to live responsibly. In Cape Town, a small social movement arose, urging people to live as if we are the universe's only hope. Posters bearing that slogan appeared on city streets, illuminated by the glow of Atlas, creating an image both haunting and powerful, humanity learning to turn paradox into purpose. As January drew to a close, millions still looked up at Atlas each night. Some saw in it a fragile hope that we were not alone. Others saw it as a warning that life itself is precarious. But most agreed on one thing. Atlas had turned the Fermi paradox into a mirror for humanity. It reminded us that even in silence, we could find meaning not from answers outside, but from the way we chose to confront the question. And on the final night of the month, in a classroom in Kyoto, a group of children wrote on the blackboard, "If the universe is silent, we will be the song." Somehow, that simple phrase seemed to contain the whole world. The Fermi paradox remained unresolved, Atlas remained silent, but humanity had learned how to live with that silence, with fear, with hope, with curiosity, and above all, with the determination to make its existence a testament that meaning can be created even when the sky itself promises nothing. February 2027. Humanity stepped into the new year suspended in an uneasy balance, caught between hope and dread, between science and speculation. For months, Atlas had been the center of a storm of theories, an ancient fragment, a cosmic scout, even a philosophical mirror for the Fermi paradox. But now a more dramatic question dominated the headlines and online forums alike. Were we witnessing a strange coincidence of nature, or the first sign of an alien invasion? Two sharply opposed camps emerged. The mainstream scientific community insisted that, however unusual, every phenomenon Atlas displayed could still be explained within the framework of natural processes. They listed the possibilities: sublimating ice, producing unexpected thrust, complex gravitational interactions, nudging its orbit, or optical effects, making its eerie green glow seem unnatural. We should not hastily brand as supernatural what we do not yet understand, a physicist at MIT declared. For them, Atlas was nothing more than a cosmic accident, an outlier within a vast tapestry. But the opposing camp, ranging from radical scientists to independent scholars, argued that there were simply too many anomalies stacked upon one another to dismiss as coincidence. The unnatural green light, the reverse tail, it's the central role in the comet swarm, the scout hypothesis. And now the unsettling deliberate silence, the absence of any detectable signal. To them, the pieces lined up like steps in a script. A researcher in Tokyo put it bluntly: if Atlas is a scout, the question is no longer what it observes, but whom it is preparing for. Have Konings to them not five. This clash no longer stayed within the ivory towers of academia. It spilled into the streets. In London, newspapers screamed headlines, "Alien Eye, opening the way." Meanwhile, in Paris, a group of scientists issued an open letter urging patience: do not panic. Atlas may be nothing more than a random gift of the cosmos, reminding us of our smallness. The collision of these narratives only deepened the public's tension, like a planet caught between two gravitational pulls. The debate seeped into homes. At dinner tables, children asked their parents, "If this is an invasion, are we safe?" In cafes, people argued, coincidence or intent, and if intent, what kind? Each question, whether innocent or sophisticated, stemmed from the same primal desire to grasp the truth. Yet the truth, like Atlas itself, hovered just out of reach. On social media, a viral wave spread. Simulated videos depicting Atlas splitting open to reveal vast mechanical structures within. These clips, though confirmed as fictional, left millions with chills, because deep down, everyone knew, even as fantasy, the scenario was not entirely impossible. And so, at this crossroads between science and extraterrestrial suspicion, humanity entered a new state, dramatic, taut, as though the entire planet were watching a cosmic tribunal unfold. Atlas was the silent witness, and we, its audience, could do nothing but speculate on testimony that had never yet been spoken. Only a few weeks into the new year, the debate around Atlas had escalated into a global storm. The world split sharply into two camps: those who believed in a cosmic coincidence, and those who insisted it was a harbinger of something extraterrestrial. The two sides clashed relentlessly in the media, turning the question, "What is Atlas?" into a fiery battle of worldviews. In New York, a group of mainstream scientists held a press conference to declare, there is no evidence that Atlas has an artificial origin. They presented a cascade of computational models, explaining that the green glow could result from unusual ionization in its gas tail, and that its skewed orbit could be accounted for by sublimating ice deep within. But the event quickly veered into controversy when a journalist stood up and asked, "Then why do all these anomalies occur together, in the same object? Why has no other comet ever displayed such a complex chain of phenomena?" The scientists had no clear answer. Their silence only fueled suspicion. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, another conference focused on the extraterrestrial scout theory. Presenters unveiled striking simulations. Atlas was not a simple ball of ice and dust, but a hollow structure housing unknown instruments. They compared it to the recon ships of classic science fiction, pointing out that Atlas's orbit looked eerily like the deliberate adjustments of an object trying to maintain optimal surveillance of Earth. The hall fell into an uneasy silence. No one dared laugh. The terror came not from flimsy logic, but from how perfectly the theory aligned with the unspoken fears already buried in the public psyche. On social media, the storm reached fever pitch. On one side, hashtags surged. Number cosmic coincidence. Number just a natural comet. On the other hand, rival hashtags dominated just as fiercely. Number Scout Atlas. Number alien signal. Viral simulations spread like wildfire, videos of Atlas exploding to reveal vast machinery within, or of the night sky suddenly filling with streaks of light descending toward Earth. Everyone knew they were fakes, yet still their hearts pounded, because deep down, people feared the fantasy was not entirely impossible. Anxiety spilled onto the streets. In Berlin, crowds flocked to abandoned Cold War bunkers, preparing for a possible doomsday. In Los Angeles, survival food stores reported skyrocketing sales. In Rio de Janeiro, collective prayer vigils bloomed, thousands gathering under the night sky, singing and weeping as if to send a message to whoever or whatever might be hidden within Atlas. Politics could not escape the vortex either. Some nations called for ramping up observation and developing space-based defenses. The United Nations held a closed-door meeting, but leaks revealed deep fractures. Some delegations urged sending a signal of peace, while others insisted on absolute silence, fearing any message might invite catastrophe. It was as if the entire world had been drawn into a cosmic chess game, an unseen opponent, rules undefined, and the next move possibly sealing humanity's fate. Against this backdrop, Atlas became a symbol of unbearable tension. To some, it was a mirror of human smallness, proof that the cosmos could spin out bizarre coincidences beyond our ability to explain. To others, it was an alien eye, patiently watching, preparing to open a curtain on a scenario no one dared to name. And so humanity lived each day with a racing pulse, as though seated in a cosmic theatre, waiting to see whether the final act would be invasion or simply the cruel joke of destiny. By mid-February 2027, just as global debates showed no sign of cooling, a new stream of data from major observatories pushed the world into even tighter suspense. Telescopes in Chile and Hawaii simultaneously recorded unusual oscillations in the reflected light from Atlas. Scientists described them as light pulses, occurring in regular intervals unlike any natural process of sublimation or reflection ever documented. Immediately, proponents of the extraterrestrial hypothesis cried out, "It's a signal!" To them, Atlas was transmitting ordered sequences of light, something akin to a cosmic binary code. Even without concrete proof, the idea alone jolted millions awake in the middle of the night. On social media, thousands of videos dissecting each pulse went viral. Some claimed it was an attempt at contact, others said it was a warning, and still others swore they recognized patterns resembling ancient mathematical symbols. In contrast, the scientific mainstream scrambled to calm the storm. They explained the phenomenon as possibly caused by alternating reflections from an uneven surface or by periodic outgassing of buried ice. Yet to the public, these explanations rang hollow like weary defenses against the undeniable image of Atlas, blinking in the sky. A major British newspaper ran the headline, "Is Atlas sending a message?" Within hours, it was shared millions of times. In Washington, an emergency meeting was convened. Some national security advisors urged immediate preparations for the worst-case scenario. If Atlas were an alien device, then these light pulses might represent the final stage before the next move. NASA's scientists pushed back, insisting patience was essential and that no definitive data existed. The debate inside the room stretched taut as a wire, mirroring the rift tearing through the entire world. On city streets, public behavior shifted into extremes. In Moscow, long lines formed outside supermarkets as residents stocked up on food supplies. In New Delhi, collective prayer gatherings grew larger by the day, citizens sitting cross-legged in silence, their eyes fixed on the horizon where Atlas gleamed. In Sydney, groups of young people staged demonstrations under banners reading, "We have the right to know the truth," protesting what they believed were government cover-ups. A shared sense of breathless unease swept across humanity. No one knew what these light pulses truly meant. Were they a trick of nature, or the opening line of a cosmic conversation? And if it was communication, what was being said? A greeting, a warning, or a declaration of war? Philosophers entered the discourse, reframing the moment. If Atlas truly carries a message, a professor in Vienna remarked, then this is not merely an astronomical event. It is an existential one. From that instant, humanity will no longer be defined by what we think of ourselves, but by how we choose to respond to that message. His words rippled through the world, leaving many with a lump in their throats, for they sensed that the truth, whatever it might be, would forever alter the portrait humanity had painted of the universe. Atlas, with its silence punctuated by strange pulses of light, transformed the February sky into the most dramatic stage in modern history. The entire planet lived in a state of suspended anticipation. Night after night, millions of eyes fixed upward, hearts pounding faster with every flash of green, as though Earth itself were holding its breath, waiting to see if it was merely a coincidence of nature, or the drumroll to the first act of contact, or confrontation, with an intelligence beyond. By the end of February 2027, the night sky seemed to have transformed into a vast courtroom. Atlas still hung suspended, its cold green glow pulsing at intervals, and each flash felt like a question hurled down at humanity. Was this coincidence or intent? Was it the play of nature, or the signal of an alien intelligence? The entire planet became a jury, staring at a lone witness, a witness both silent and unyielding. Within the scientific community, tension reached its peak. One camp insisted the pulses were nothing more than irregular reflections, like headlights hitting a cracked mirror. The other rejected that explanation outright. Too regular, too precise to be random. Debates were broadcast live, drawing millions of viewers, each dataset and image dissected as if they were pieces of evidence in a cosmic trial. Audiences sat riveted to their screens, their hearts racing with each argument, as though the fate of humanity hung in the balance of those heated exchanges. Global politics stretched taut as a wire. Some nations declared they would prepare space defense systems, treating Atlas as a looming threat. Others urged restraint, wait and watch, fearing that any military action might be misread as provocation. The United Nations convened repeatedly, but every resolution stalled between these two extremes, and in that deadlock, anxiety only deepened. A single wrong move could plunge the planet into chaos. On the streets, demonstrations surged. In some cities, crowds shouted, "This is an invasion, prepare." In others, banners proclaimed, "Just coincidence, don't spread fear." In Paris, artists erected a massive light sculpture of Atlas, its glowing green eyes gazing down on the crowd, stirring both awe and dread. In Mexico City, thousands knelt beneath the night sky, candles arranged into a single message: "We want the truth." Atlas remained silent, yet that very silence boomed like a drumbeat, amplifying humanity's hunger for an answer. Social media exploded in frenzy. One simulation video, viewed tens of millions of times, imagined Atlas splitting open to reveal thousands of smaller ships within. Viewers shivered, knowing it was CGI, yet unable to shake the thought that such a vision fit too well with their hidden fears, that they were watching the prologue to an invasion. Another viral clip portrayed Atlas dissolving into cosmic dust, proof that it was nothing more than a quirk of nature. Millions watched that version through tears, as if desperate to believe in the innocence of the universe. Amid the chaos, philosophers stepped forward. "Perhaps the answer itself is less important than how we respond," said a professor at Oxford. "If Atlas is a coincidence, then we learn the universe is stranger than imagination. If it is a sign of another intelligence, then we learn we are not alone. Either way, humanity is forever changed." His words did not erase fear, but planted a seed of reflection. Regardless of outcome, Atlas had already reshaped humanity beyond recognition. And so, as February came to a close, the sky remained silent. Atlas still hung there, its green light pulsing rhythmically like the heartbeat of the cosmos. People continued to argue, to fear, to hope. But one truth had crystallized. Atlas had thrust humanity into the most dramatic moment in its history. A moment where every breath carried the same unspoken question. Was this the dawn of an alien invasion, or merely the cruel joke of a cold, indifferent universe?